too.
We're gonna wait for Ken.
Okay.
Restroom.
Oh, okay. So.
Well, I'll let you enlighten us on that. He is.
Do you have all?
All right, I see Ken returning here, so we will open the October 17th, 2013 City Council meeting. And with that, we'll turn to roll call. Cindy.
Thank you. Mayor Turley, Gary Brevetto,
Here.
Bob Carlson,
Here.
Carol Harvey,
Here.
Ken Matthews,
Here.
John Schaefer, Eric Smith.
Here.
Thank you.
And before we go to the Pledge of Allegiance, David has a brief update, I guess, on the mayor and what's been going on and why he's not here this evening.
Thanks, Mayor Pro Tem. Last Tuesday a week ago, Mayor Turley was involved in a non-fatal motorcycle accident out in the Terrialls. He was out taking pictures of the beautiful countryside, and he went over an embankment and fortunately had on his helmet and all his protective gear, but slid into a rock. The rock caused 5 ribs to be broken, and those ribs are broken in various ways. Some are overlapping, some are shattered. Fortunately, some good Samaritans came past, were able to get to cell phone range, called an ambulance, and he was delivered to Pikes Peak Regional Medical Center, where they stabilized him. And just yesterday, he was moved to Penrose, where they have decided to do surgery to piece some of those ribs back together. Several of us have visited with him over the course of the last week. He was doing very well today. Today was the first day that he was somewhat coherent. He may be watching now, so I want to be careful with the words that I choose. But he was feeling significantly better. He was sounding much stronger, and he feels very confident about going into the surgery tomorrow. We think it'll take him about a week to recover from that surgery, and then we'll welcome him back home to Woodland Park. So thanks for that opportunity to provide that update.
All right, thank you. Would you guys please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, moving on to item number 4 under ceremonies, presentations, and appointments. We have one scheduled for this evening, and that is a presentation of the Memorial Park Redevelopment Master Plan that was completed, I believe, by Land Patterns. And for that, we're going to turn to Cindy Keating, who is our Parks and Rec Director.
Thank you and good evening. In June this year, we contracted with Land Patterns to create a master plan design for the redevelopment of Memorial Park. After several months of community meetings and park design development, Land Patterns is here tonight to present the Memorial Park Redevelopment Master Plan final designs. After the presentation, if Council is prepared to approve the Memorial Park Master Plan final design, we would recommend a motion for approval. If Council is not prepared to approve a final design, we would ask for a timeline to address consideration in the near future. At this time, I'd like to introduce Land Patterns, Dave Morrison, Brian Kniep, and David Maharis. Will you join me at the podium, please?
Thank you, Cindy. As you mentioned, my name is Brian Kniep. I'm a landscape architect with Land Patterns, Inc. With me, Dave Morrison, the president of Land Patterns, and Dave Maharis, president of Catamount Engineering, our civil engineer on the firm, or on the team. I just want to thank you, first of all, this evening for allowing us to present this master plan concept. It's been a great, informative, and fun process working with the community, working with city staff, and working with a lot of you folks to come up with this master plan design. To begin with, I just want to take a brief moment to walk through and give an overview of the process that we've gone through with this plan and kind of tell everybody where we've been and where we've come to the conclusions that we've come to on this. To begin with, site analysis maps we're showing up here. We began looking at the site itself to determine what problems we were going to have on the site, what was existing, what amenities and conditions were out there that we could be taking advantage of, and how we could really be utilizing this park and this space within the community at large. You'll see up there we have a slope analysis map, a existing vegetation and view shed map, and a existing conditions and amenities map. We also had a map as well to talk about how the park ties into the community as a whole, how it's connected to downtown and connected to the various neighborhoods around the park. Part of this site inventory was walking the park, doing an analysis and an inventory of all the trees, all of the vegetation on site, and really just looking at what the view sheds were. We wanted to really focus on what sets this memorial park apart from other memorial parks in other cities. And the uniqueness of this really boils down to its view sheds and how many views and where those views are at within the park itself. You can find memorial parks in a lot of cities, but you'll be hard-pressed to find one that looks like this. From there, we moved into what we felt was a very important part of this process, was the public involvement. We really wanted to focus on public involvement and create a citizen-driven design as we move this forward. We felt that the stakeholders of this community really had to have a voice in this design, and that it wasn't to be done behind closed doors or done with blinders on. And so we really focused on making sure we got as many folks and citizen groups involved as we could throughout this process. Our first meeting was with the Park and Rec Advisory Board. They gave us our initial direction with who we should be meeting with, who we should be talking to, those types of things. From there, we moved on to holding several we moved on to actually having a booth at the 4th of July celebration, where we handed out surveys, did a lot of one-on-one interviews with citizens throughout the day, and really looked to get a lot of feedback. We've collated all the surveys, and you'll see that information in the master plan document that we'll hand you guys at the end of the presentation. It was very informative to really just talk with users at a large event like that and see how the space was actively being used. From there, we started meeting with individual groups and holding open to the public design charrettes. The first one that we met with was the senior center, and later in the process we met with the teen center as well, and it was really interesting to see the dichotomy between the two groups, but how much they had in common and how much each group wanted the other to enjoy the park and how much they really wanted the park to tie together. And you'll start to see as we move through this process the community-driven aspects of this. There was really a sense of community as we got into these charrettes. You also notice a few of the photos up there of the public design charrettes where we got people to play landscape architect for an evening and get out there and design and put together the park and see how they would see it working. It was a very fun time, very informative. We got a lot of good input from that process. We also had a meeting with the high school, presented designs there as well, and from that we collated where the conceptual designs are going as we move forward. As part of the conceptual design process, one of the groups that did come out of all of these public involvement processes was the Woodland Aquatic Center folks. We took our direction from the Park and Rec Advisory Board and city staff to make sure to include a footprint in one of the concepts of the Woodland Aquatic Center as we started developing these concepts. As you can see on, wrong button. As you can see with the three concepts here, we tried to keep some various themes throughout them, but we didn't want any one concept to be be-all, end-all, this is the one type of concept. We really wanted to show the menu of opportunities that existed within the park itself to allow people to see how these things really fit together and allow us as professionals to meld their needs and wishes together. You can see in concept number 3, we do include the footprint for the aquatic center down there. Concept number 2, we have a rather large gathering area, shelter space as the focal feature of that concept. And in concept number 1, we moved that to the northeastern corner of the park to really take advantage of the views from that end of the park. Once we presented these initial conceptual designs, we met with the Park and Rec Advisory Board again and took our direction from them once again as far as where these concepts should be refined and what our final design should look like. Again, from them, we wanted to make sure to include the Woodland Aquatic Center as a separate design within this. I'll get that button yet. You'll see that we do have a Master Plan A and a Master Plan B. The only real significant difference between these two is the Aquatic Center and the plaza area developed in front of the Aquatic Center in that corner up there. The remainder of the park we wanted to keep as similar in design as possible so that it wasn't one or the other. It was, you could incorporate the elements of both together if need be, and ultimately design some flexibility into the master plan. Really, these master plans at the end of the day were the culmination of the public input, the analysis, and our design efforts. We really wanted to, again, respond to a citizen-driven design as we move these forward and create spaces that not only were conducive for active play or active use, but also passive, quiet reflection for folks that are out there in the park. Go ahead and move on to Master Plan A. What I'll do is I'll start to kind of walk everybody through Master Plan A, and then we'll move into Master Plan B with just that northern area that was changed on there. You can see we've kept a very open flow of space throughout the park. We really wanted to, and the park board was very adamant about having that green space and that flow throughout the park so people can move from one activity to another or have several different activities going on at various times. Multifunction space was a big key for these types of elements through here. You also see we've got we've enhanced the playground area and moved the basketball court over to adjacent to the City Hall and the park office, or the Park and Recreation office over there. That was one thing we spoke with city engineer and the city staff early on about what's the importance of that connection through there, and it seemed to be if it was okay to put something over there, the basketball court would work great there. So we have relocated it to that area. We've also reshaped the pond in through here and made sure to deepen it in order to make it viable for fishing and viable for other activities out through there. We've added a band shelter up adjacent to the pond itself. One thing that came out of the meetings early on was people were always impressed with the park in Green Mountain Falls and the access you have to the water and the access you have out onto decks surrounding their pavilion out in the middle of the lake. While we didn't feel we could necessarily get that type of amenity in here, we felt this was a good compromise to still get people out into the water and provide that type of amenity. Also, in reshaping the pond, you'll see on the south end down here, we've done away with the earthen dam and gone to a retaining wall with a earthen berm on the inside as well, just to give ourselves room to flatten out grade at that plaza area down at there. One of the things that we noticed right off the bat and tried to design around was the fact that there's great views out of the park, but not necessarily great views into the park. So we wanted to make sure that the grading was done in a way that allowed as much visible open space into the park as possible. You'll see that we have some major view corridors lined up along the streets and from the various intersections as well into the park. That is a memorial plaza with a flagpole out abutting the water. So you have a nice view down the street facing City Hall down into that, and also from a small plaza area at the entrance of the park up into it as well. So again, it's just creating those view corridors as we're moving through into there. As we start up on the north end of the park, you can see the relocated gazebo up here. This is the existing gazebo. We heard from a number of residents that they wanted to maintain that gazebo. It was special to them. It meant a lot to them and meant a lot to the park. And so rather than just trash it and get rid of it, we felt we should give it a new location, give it something that's a little more out of the way that can be used for individual events rather than all of the larger events that it's used for now, and replacing it with a larger structure down here that could handle more of the excuse me, more of the band shelter and performance type areas. We have a deck surrounding this as well that could increase the floor plan or footprint of that as to make it a little bit easier to use. You see also in here we've included a water feature and a splash pad. One of the things that we've heard from a lot of other communities, and what we heard from this community especially, was interaction with the water and giving kids a place to play in the water was very important to a lot of the families. When we started looking at a splash pad, we talked to a number of manufacturers of the equipment and talked to other cities that have used these just to get a sense of how they function, how they work, how they fit into communities in general, and just to see their success rate. And overwhelmingly, they've been a huge success, especially in mountain communities, because you can turn them off in the winter with very minimal maintenance throughout the year. You also see that we have a stream water feature down into the pond itself through here. The plan is to, at this point anyway, to let the splash pad water feature drain through a creek bed down into the pond itself using potable water down through there. A little bit of an enlargement of that area then too, to show a bit of the detail. We're using a lot of boulders throughout the design of the park. We wanted to incorporate that as a play element into the playground area. You'll notice too we have some poured-in-place surfacing that we've drawn in here. We wanted to create a transition between any wood surfacing or engineered wood fiber surfacing before you get into the splash pad area, just to knock off any additional clingers to the bottoms of kids' feet. We also have the restroom facility with a mechanical room to service this splash pad directly adjacent. The nice thing with this is with its adjacency, outdoor showers could be added at some point in time as well to allow kids to wash off after they enter and play in the play feature themselves. If we move to the south end of the master plan, you'll see, again, the reshaped pond area down through here. With the wall feature down at this corner entrance, we planned on using that as a entry feature and having signage on that to announce the entrance into the park itself. We felt that even if you can't get a great view into the park, at least you'll have a good view of something inside the park. We have a small pergola structure over the top of that with benches built in for people to view the pond facing back towards the park, as well as being able to look out towards the mountains in the city below. The feature over here, the shelter feature that I mentioned earlier, these are two 40 by 40 foot structures. If we go to the next slide here, you'll see that we've removed the roof on this slide to give just a general idea and understanding of the eventual seating in through there. You could fit roughly 100 people fairly comfortably inside these structures. We also relocated the existing chimney into this area as well. We thought this was a good opportunity to create an outdoor living space within the park itself. Makes a nice cozy feature within there, build it into the retaining walls to preserve some of the trees that we would have to do, but really open that up and make this a nice usable feature that people could reserve and people could use for various functions within the park. You notice as well we have a fishing dock adjacent to the pond itself. We've pictured that as being about 18 inches above water surface so that kids could dangle their feet in the water if they wanted to, or in the wintertime put on their ice skates and jump right down onto the ice itself and get going. And then up here again, the Memorial Plaza with the flagpole feature prominently there in the center. To kind of showcase a little bit of the cross sections, we have regraded the site to a certain degree. The dashed lines indicate existing grade through there. Section A is basically going north-south through the center of the pond, looking to the east through there. And you can see how we've tried to flatten out the grade in through there to make it a little bit more conducive for multifunctional play space, but also leave enough slope there that if there is a concert going on, you can have seating out in the grass area, out in the grassy knoll area. Section B then is cutting directly across through here, through this plaza area with the structures. You see those in there. Again, the dashed line indicates existing grade, and you can see how much of that existing old tennis courts we would be cutting out in order to open up the views into the park itself through there. Section C is of the wall area, so you can see the wall with where the pin-mounted lettering or signage feature would be with a small pergola structure and bench built in. and then just an elevation view of the signage looking out from this corner of the park. Moving on to Plan B, with the addition of the aquatic center up here, we really did not want this to be a throw-off plan or design. We wanted this building to be incorporated into the site in a way that made sense and made it function within the space itself. The direction from the advisory board was to push as far to the west as we could in order to take advantage of existing parking and maintain as much usable open space on this side of the park as possible. You can see then too, we went ahead and stretched the water feature and splash pad over to more in front of and centrally located in front of the aquatic center itself to really highlight it, give it a special entrance, and create a nice plaza area in front of it. You can see from the section views, you'd be looking out down Center Street, down the middle of Center Street from the middle of the building there, out towards the mountain views beyond. As we start to zoom in a little bit, you can start to see the detail of this plaza itself. We really felt this should be an important piece of the park, and that this becomes another very active, usable open space within the park itself. Entrance obviously would be down from the parking lot area over here down to a water feature with some nice benches and whatnot around it. We blow it up a little bit more even to highlight that in the interaction with the playground and with the basketball court. This really creates a nice, just active play zone in front of what would be a very active building itself. Finally, we've got a few equipment examples that we were going to showcase here a little bit. We planned on using recycled materials whenever possible, keeping open structures as much as possible, using a lot of off-the-shelf type structures. We also are showing a few of the splash pad equipment examples. Again, these are used all over Colorado and have been very successful and very kid-friendly within a lot of different parks. Every city that we've talked to that has used these has been very positive about them and very positive about their use. The playground equipment, we went with ADA equipment that fits both age ranges from K to 5 and 5 to 12 in there, with any other equipment as well. And then we also looked at a few types of light features. Again, these are all just examples and details that obviously further out in the process will get fleshed out more and more, but as we were going through, this is always good to look at so we make sure we're maintaining the spaces that we need for a lot of these things. I think that's about all that I have right now, so we could open it up for questions, and if we could pass out the master plans that we took. Oh, they've got them up there already.
So we have two designs, it's A and B.
Yes, A and B, that's correct.
Carol?
Yeah, while she's passing those out, what was the footprint of the plan with the aquatic center? How many square feet did you include?
We used a footprint of 150 by 200 that was provided to us by the aquatic center folks. I apologize, I can never remember the name of your group off the top of my head. I'm sorry, Mr. Carlson.
Ken?
Yeah, regarding the aquatic center, I guess maybe just found out today because I looked at two designs, and of course the senior center is missing in one of them.
Correct.
And I found out today apparently that's proposed to be included in the aquatic center.
Yes, I believe so. From what?
How much space does that take out of there? Do we know?
That I honestly don't know. We haven't designed the building at all. We were told a footprint essentially, and we tried to leave enough space around it for expansion if need be, or to fit it into the site a bit too.
And the aquatic center hopefully will come at a later date sometime.
Right.
But if we went, for example, with Plan A,
Mm-hmm.
and then a couple of years later decide to put in the aquatic center,
Mm-hmm.
how much are we, I don't know how to say it other than waste our money on digging up what you've just done?
Well, that was where we tried to make sure that the two designs were similar enough that it would impact the least amount possible if that did happen. There are some changes. If we back up a little bit here to, maybe I do it this way. Yeah. If we back up to here, you can see that the water feature in front there and the splash pad are slightly different
Yes.
than what they would be before, but the footprint of everything basically to the south for the most part of this sidewalk would remain the same. And so really it would be a matter of hopefully it really depends on construction phasing, but hopefully the splash pad isn't the first thing to get built. Hopefully that is some of the other site situations are taken care of first, and there's more direction known at that time before that gets built.
So we don't know for sure of that 100 by 200 square feet, how much is aquatic center and how much is senior center?
I would have to
At this
defer.
point?
Yeah, I would have to defer to the aquatic center
determined, I
folks.
guess.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
If I could very quickly,
ahead.
recall that on Monday night, we talked about phasing the construction of Memorial Park. And I think Land Patterns, Inc. has done a good job of blending the two concepts. And what I would suggest to you is that whichever you choose to select, we're probably going to start on the southeast corner and work our way northward. There's going to be lots of site work that's going to have to take place, lots of earth movement and those earth moving. And so there's going to be a lot of work done before we even get to the area where the splash pad or the Woodland Aquatic Center would go. So I think you'd be very safe at this point choosing either design, knowing that there's flexibility as we move closer into that northwest corner.
That's
Exactly.
the reason for my question, really.
I understand. Bob?
Thank you. Yes, when we started this whole thing, the idea was to do it in phases. And right now, I don't see any description of the phases. You brought to our attention that it would start in the southeast corner, but that wasn't part of the presentation. Is it in this book or
No.
something?
Well, first understand that what Land Patterns, Inc. was charged to do was the master plan for the site.
Okay.
And they may make some recommendations on the phasing, but the phasing will really be part of the site design and what makes the most sense from an engineering perspective on how to build it. So I've not looked at the master plan. I don't know if there's phasing in it. There is some phasing in it, so I would need to study that. But certainly as we go through the engineering and get a better idea of what the firm costs would be, we would know how that phasing would happen.
But
Exactly.
I agree with what you've said, though. It makes sense to start out on that end and work up, depending on the phasing of the two projects. The question was asked, though, how would we accommodate the senior center? Again, it hasn't been designed. We've said, hey, we need to start with the concept design so we can finalize it. But very conceptually, in order to come up with a footprint, we provided some notional information.
Right.
And basically, on the left side of that footprint would be, the natatorium area has to be like 20 feet high. If you've ever been to any swimming pool, this pool ceiling is very high. But on one end where you have the service area, the entrance area with the paying for desk with the membership fees and the locker rooms, etc. That would be in a sense on one floor, and above it would be like the senior center. But the idea was they would share a number of things like the dining room, kitchen. The dining room could be a multi-purpose room type of thing. Again, that's just notional, and that would be finalized with the architect engineer during the scoping meeting as part of the concept design process. Okay?
Mr. Matthews, you came into this process a little bit into it, and understand that this group knew that with the aquatic center there was perhaps the opportunity the senior center would go away and be incorporated into that.
Yeah.
So we would have to go.
I realize
into,
I'm being brought up to date. I appreciate that.
right.
But I did have a question regarding that, and I don't want to get off target here. If the senior center is in that, and since we're in the budget scenario these days, is there some impact with the senior center sharing some cost with being there? Do they have grants? Is the city funding that now? I guess I don't know that. So I'm just asking if that impacts the funding of the aquatic center building.
It very possibly could. Remember, tonight's discussion is on the master plan of
understand.
Memorial Park. But to answer your question, the city provides the building that the senior center is in, and we provide maintenance for that building. But the function itself, Teller Senior Coalition and the Senior Center, that's self-funded. They get grants through Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments and others. So there could be an opportunity. Don't know what the magnitude would be.
Okay, I don't want to get you off
So,
plan here, sorry.
yeah, no, I think that's a good question. Do we have other questions as it relates to the plan or to, land patterns while they're here? And, we can discuss some more of this.
Chairman, if I may, just real quick, there was some questions there initially regarding the cost estimate and implementation plan. We were charged to prepare cost estimates for these two designs and an implementation phasing plan. So in part of your book here, we didn't want to bore everybody with those numbers and actually go through that process. But we do want to emphasize that we try to fulfill our responsibilities. So you'll see in the back of this book a cost estimate for every aspect that you see on either one of these plans. And those cost estimates are broken out between A and B. They're side by side so you can see how those work out. And in addition to that, we also gave you an implementation plan, a phasing plan. Now, this implementation plan was based on how we see construction evolving for the total site. So, again, when you have an opportunity, we hope you'll review those numbers, and if you feel a need to come back and ask us specific questions about those, we'd be more happy to do that. So, thank you.
Well, David, before you leave then,
Yes, ma'am.
in your recollection, what is the major difference in your cost estimate for the two plans, A and B?
Dollar-wise or plan-wise?
Dollar-wise.
There's a $500,000 difference between Plan A and Plan B, and that is driven by, I might let David, because David's really the one who crunched these numbers for us. Do you want to come up and address that, Dave? That will tell you what is impacted with that price difference.
Thanks.
So really the major cost differences have to do with the amount of grading and export from the site, because the site is an export site. So we included excavation for the building footprint in the secondary cost estimate, and that's
And
the
that
biggest
secondary
cost.
cost estimate is
For
excavation for the,
Design B,
Okay.
Concept B with the rec center.
got it. And that's a $500,000?
A $500,000 difference between the two concepts.
Thank you.
There's also some utility relocation that has to happen, and the plaza is a fairly pricey item in front of that building.
And that's not excavating for the aquatic center?
That is excavating,
Okay.
just the excavation.
Okay.
And remember, if that work were to be done, it would be part of the aquatic center construction cost,
Yes.
not the development
Understand.
of Memorial Park.
I understand.
You have a question?
Yeah, but some of that excavation is in that green space too. Aren't you hauling out a bunch of material from there?
It does change the overall earthwork analysis as far as adjacent to the building and in some of those concepts, but not in a major way. The majority of it is export for the building footprint.
Another question then on phasing. In your estimation, what is the long pole in the tent for either plan? Which objective would you have to reach first to even begin either of the plans?
Well, really, the way we approached phasing was kind of looking at it from an overall, large chunk first assumption, where you do the grading and stripping and demolition on the park, and then we kind of took the second phase as being more of the public works aspects or the improvements within Center Street, the utility relocations, and that's kind of when the choice would have to be made of which plan to pursue.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions?
If
Thank
I
you.
may, in Cindy's introductory remarks, she was encouraging council to make a decision tonight. That's not necessary. There's no sense of urgency necessary. There's two of your members that are missing. If you want some time to dig into this and to really understand the components, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. We could even, if you wanted to, have a work session with the Park and Rec Advisory Board to understand their thinking, however you want to do this. Typically with master plans, you rely on the staff and the subcommittees, in this case Park and Rec Advisory Board, to bring you something that generally is a 95% solution. So there's no sense of urgency to approve this tonight if you're not comfortable doing that. Recognize that the two plans, though, are extremely similar except for that one corner.
Mm-hmm. Well, David, my question then would be, is there any impact on current budget deliberations?
I don't think so, because what we discussed on Monday night was moving forward with a design, and certainly if the design incorporates an aquatic center, There's some things that are a bit different. You've heard some of the excavation concerns. That design would be slightly different. It would be relatively simple for us to draw, say, a phase line, if you will, between the very similar components of the project, and in other words, isolate the northwest corner and ask a design firm to design the rest of the project and leave out that area that might be modified depending on which way we go with an aquatic center. That's very possible as well.
Eric, I would like to postpone any deliberate or any final decision and possibly recommend a work session. And I'd also like to go on public record to say that the city has made no obligation to placing an aquatic center at that location or any location in the city limits.
Okay. I don't know how the rest of council feels.
I agree.
All right. So I guess what I would say is, first off, I think that the Park and Rec Advisory Board, Land Patterns, all the folks that have been involved, many folks, have done a great job. I think we have two outstanding plans. They are very similar. I think you've done a great job as it relates to saying, well, I could draw a phase line very easily, and pretty much everything from the basketball court and that little sidewalk, and up to the street there is all very similar. And so I think we probably should have a little more discussion. We are in the throes of the budget season. One of the things we have identified that we'd like to move forward, I believe, is to move forward with a final design for Memorial Park. So I don't think from a timing perspective this is going to drag out for months and months. But I also, we've had discussions as it relates to the aquatic center and some options or opportunities we might have to try to move that along a little bit as well. So I think if you'll give us a little more time that we can flush some of that out, we'll be able to hopefully come to some sort of a decision. And the good news is, like I said, probably 60 to 70% of the park's the same, and we could very easily move forward, I think, with the final design on it. And then maybe the other 30% kind of gets held off a little bit until we flesh out some other items. So any other comments from council?
Well, I just noticed there wasn't any provision in there for volleyball court. Is that something that people just didn't seem to want? Or?
We didn't have a lot of feedback saying they loved the volleyball courts. It seemed to get used about once a year at 4th of July, and that was really about it. And so one of the purposes with having a lot of multi-purpose fields was the ability to set up a net if you wanted to, or hold a weekend volleyball league on those fields.
Any other questions? Or
I'm sorry.
Go
Just
ahead.
one last comment. I want to thank Land Patterns Inc. and Park and Rec for pulling the community together. I think that's one of the things we've tried to do over the last few years, is really get community buy-in with the different processes, and the fingerprints of the community are all over this design, and I'm very excited for the opportunity to implement it.
Yeah,
and to play on the playground.
and I concur as well. This is obviously a focal point for Woodland Park. Every year we have so many events out there, the 4th of July. I think it's something that's a pretty high priority for us, and I can't wait to see that start coming to fruition, and I think it'll be a great thing for our community. I think you guys have done a great job, so thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, moving along.
I just wanted to thank you
Oh,
for
I'm
the
sorry.
opportunity to be able to show you these designs tonight, and look forward to our work session in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you. Great job, Cindy. Thank you. All right, now we're moving on. Cindy, we have no additions, deletions, or corrections to the agenda?
That's correct.
All right. Item number 6, consent calendar. We have 2 items on the consent calendar this evening. One is to approve the minutes of the October 3rd meeting, and the other is to approve September statements of expenditures and authorize the mayor to sign the warrants and payment thereof. Any discussion from council? Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for approval. Cindy?
Thank you. Brevetto?
Yes.
Carlson?
Yes.
Harvey?
Yes.
Matthews?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
All right, moving on to item number 7, unfinished business. There's a matter related to a motion for reconsideration that was made by Teller County, and to that we're going to turn to our city attorney, Aaron Smith.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Mayor Pro Tem and Council, I have provided for you in your packet a memorandum along with a proposed order denying the motions for reconsideration, and that memo and proposed order have been revised slightly with what's in front of you, and the change in what you're seeing in front of you is that throughout the motion, throughout the memo and order in your packet, I refer to a motion, but in the memo and the order on the dais in front of you, I refer to motions because there were 2 motions filed by Teller County. So that's the change that those documents in front of you contain. Then getting to a short explanation of the recommended action before you tonight, let me just start with the fact that Teller County did file on September 20th 2 motions for reconsideration of the Southwest Valley annexations. Such a motion is a prerequisite to filing a lawsuit. And so that is something that has to be done in order to challenge those annexations by a lawsuit. The county's motions ask the City Council to reconsider its approval of the annexation of the Southwest Valley Annexation Plat 1 and 2 areas, Resolutions 753 and 754, and the related annexation agreement. The motions, however, were filed past the time required by state law. Because the motions were not filed by the deadline state law imposes, City Council lacks jurisdiction to consider the motions and, well, to consider the county's arguments, and therefore has only authority to deny the motions. Because Council lacks jurisdiction to consider the county's arguments, there is no need to entertain any comment on the motions. Again, as I mentioned, in front of Council is a proposed order denying the motions on the grounds that they were filed too late. And even if they had been timely filed, the record on the annexations shows that the City Council already thoroughly considered the county's points and that the City Council was not persuaded by them. I would recommend Council approve the order denying the motions for reconsideration and would be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions of Aaron on this matter?
I think my first question would be, what would be the county's counter to our non-consideration of their motion?
Or denial?
Or denial.
Well, I can't speak for the county, but the deadline set out in the statute is a statute of limitations. When that is missed, it's missed. And so, again, I can't speak for the county, but as a matter of law, having missed that deadline, this council really has no jurisdiction over those. And it's not just about the county and the city at this point. It's really about the applicant. The property owner has rights. And so when state legislatures consider statutes of limitations, they weigh all of those interests. And in this instance, the state legislature has said, on balance, 10 days is what's necessary so that when that 10-day time frame passes and no timely motion has been filed, the applicant knows that, the applicant's lenders know that, and the applicant can move forward.
Any other questions? So what the city attorney is recommending is that we adopt this motion denying the order denying the motion for reconsideration. Okay.
Second.
All right. We have a motion and a second to adopt the order denying the motion for reconsideration.
Maybe the motions.
Motions. Sorry, motions for reconsideration. All right. Cindy.
Carlson?
Yes.
Harvey?
Yes.
Matthews?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
Rovetto?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
All right. As we step forward on the next several items, several of them are quasi-judicial, and so I just want to read into the record that council members use electronic devices to access the materials relevant to the public hearing before us. But be assured that it is common practice of this city council that these devices are not being used for texting, emailing, or other communications during public hearings. So I would remind council not to utilize electronic devices during the quasi-judicial proceedings this evening for any type of outside correspondence with anyone. All right, item 8A is to consider ordinance number 1196 on initial posting concerning a request from Teller County Waste for approval of a conditional use permit, special use permit, and site plan review. And for that, we'll turn to Sally Riley, our planning director.
Thank you. This is initial posting for the ordinance 1196. And just to inform you that in your packet, Planning Commission did hear this case last Thursday on October 10th. They recommended approval of the conditional use, special use, and site plan review for Teller County Waste as requested by Jay Baker, the owner of the property. And staff would recommend that you move to approve this ordinance on initial reading and set the public hearing for November 7th. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions of Sally as it relates to this item on initial posting? Obviously, there'll be a lot more information and discussion when we take the matter up on the second reading. Okay. So I would accept the motion.
So moved.
Second.
Move to approve.
Yes, move to approve.
Okay. And a
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve ordinance 1196 on initial posting and to set the public hearing for November 7th, 2013. Cindy?
Thank you. Harvey?
Yes.
Matthews?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
Bravetto?
Yes.
Carlson?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
Now we're moving on to item 9A, which is under public hearings. 9A is to consider ordinance 1195, amending chapters 20.02, 20.03, and 20.05 of the flood damage prevention regulations of the Woodland Park Municipal Code. And for that, we'll turn over for a presentation to Ms. Riley.
Thank you. A month ago, I did review this ordinance in quite a bit of detail. This is a requirement because the state of Colorado included additional requirements for the management of floodplains, specifically dealing with critical facilities. Those are facilities like fire and police stations, hospitals, emergency shelters, and communication facilities. The requirement for flood proofing or creating a freeboard of at least 1 foot above the base flood elevation, and then also standards dealing with the surcharge criteria for floodways. I'm happy to go through the 10 sections if you'd like me to this evening. Ms. Harvey did ask that I share floodplain maps with you this evening, so I'm prepared to do that. Whatever you would like, and then we'll have a public hearing, public comment.
All right. What is council's desire as it relates? I know Sally spent a great deal of time, and we've had an opportunity to review this. Is it something that you feel like we need to step through line by line, or are we comfortable, or are there questions related to it?
No, but I do appreciate if you could just give us an overview of the floodplain areas for the city.
Happy to do that.
All right, Sally.
Everyone.
Thank you.
These are the flood insurance rate maps that were established initially in 1988. And at that time, FEMA studied Woodland Park and created the maps. And I'm going to start on the north end of town. And this is both the level gulch, floodplain that starts on this east side. This is in Teller County, and then moves to the west. The portion that is in the city is near Valley View Drive and starts by the middle school and heads through a portion of Teller County and Paint Pony. And then there's also a portion that starts behind Columbine Elementary School and then heads north and converges on the Lloyd Gulch drainage way. So that's one portion of the map. Then it connects at Highway 67, goes under the highway for the Lloyd Gulch section, and back behind the police operations station. This is the Level Gulch portion that ties into the Lloyd Gulch, and then they both intersect with Trout Creek. So that's the area that is affected on the north side of Woodland Park that all flows to the Platte River drainage system. On the south side, this map is shown because the gray areas of the Fountain Creek main stem that starts up by Woodland Station, the gray portion is what was established in 1988. And in 2009, the city did a letter of map revision, and that is the colored portion of this map. And the East Fork of Fountain Creek starts up in front of Gateway Elementary School and then runs southward and is a confluence of the main stem and the East Fork just north of the Safeway Shopping Center. So I wanted to show you this to show you how different after the letter of map revision study was done. And that was done because there were so many other improvements that were done in the area of McDonald's and this section, as well as the area of Cavalier Park and those drainage improvements done in '98, I believe. And the south side of this map shows from, this is behind Safeway, and then Aspen Garden Way, and flows down past the Saddle Club property, and you can really see a difference in terms of now the floodway is much more condensed. And we didn't go as far as Walmart because they did a major rework of the floodplain when they were constructed in 2007, and also filed a LOMAR with the FEMA. And then just to show you from an aerial perspective, this gives you a better feel for the East Fork starting up by Gateway Elementary School, and that new alignment of the 100-year floodplain, then crosses under the highway. You can see how it changed as a result of those improvements to the highway and underground systems. And then the portion that starts up by Woodland Station and traverses through this portion of town where it went underground, and the system was able to carry the 100-year or 1% chance storm, actually the floodway is removed. And that is what is going to happen in this next section, where the city has just started the construction of the main stem here and the East Fork, where their confluence comes together just north of Snow Performance. And here's the section that runs behind Safeway and down south across Aspen Garden Way, the new bridge that was put in as a result of the Safeway development. And then the portion that extends from Aspen Garden Way down to the Walmart facility. So those are the floodplains as they exist today, and a little bit about the evolution of those floodplains.
Sally, I appreciate it. I know if you have a lot of patience, you can access the firm maps online, but I wondered if we could post these to our website.
Sure.
Yeah.
Not a problem.
Those are very nice, concise products. Thanks.
Thank you.
Any other questions of Sally before we open up the public comment period? Thank you, Sally. With that, we'll open up the public comment period on this item. Is there anyone wishing to speak on this item this evening? No? All right, we'll close the public comment period and bring it up for council to discuss or move things along.
Move things along.
Is there a motion?
Motion.
To what? Approve?
Motion to approve, yeah.
All right.
1195, right?
1195, you got it, Ken.
I'll second that.
All right. So we have a motion and a second to approve ordinance number 1195. Cindy?
Thank you. Matthews?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
Brevetto?
Yes.
Carlson?
Yes.
Harvey?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
And as we move on to item 9B, I don't know if we drew straws or what we did, but I have got to recuse myself from this item because I have some personal involvement in it as it relates to civil engineering work. And so, David, I don't know if we decided who would run the meeting for this item.
We did. Let me describe to you what that process is. Typically, when the mayor's gone and the mayor pro tem is gone, we turn to the next most senior elected official. Recall that just very recently, that was Terry Harrison. And so when Dave and Eric were gone, Terry stepped right in. We had 3 council members who were elected at the same time, Harvey, Brevetto, and Carlson. So all 3 of you have exact same seniority. So we went to the next most logical thing, and that was who got the most votes. And that was Ms. Harvey. So we believe Ms. Harvey should take the seat of the mayor while Mr. Smith recuses himself.
Okay. It reminds me of that saying about there's no rank among. Never mind.
I know. I know.
This is like figuring out the national championship matchup in football. All right, so I'm going to step down.
Okay, so item 9B is a request for the city's review and approval of a minor subdivision final plat titled L. Clifford Edition Filing Number 2 for a tract of land located in the northwest quarter of Section 24, Township 12 South, Range 69 West of the 6th PM in the city of Woodland Park, Teller County, Colorado, consisting of 7.22 acres. More specifically, this is a replat of Lot 1, L. Clifford Edition, west of Highway 67, which is located between the south of Spruce Haven Drive and north of the unimproved Midland Avenue right-of-way. And I'll turn this over to Lisa. Thank you.
Thank you, and good evening, Council. Tonight I bring to you the L. Clifford Edition Filing Number 2 Final Plat Minor Subdivision. And this is for our applicant, Arizona Door and Sash Company, Mr. Billy White. And Hicks Snedeker is the purchasing owner, Ray Hicks, Snedeker Companies, and he has a project team that he's put together for this project. And the project team lead is here this evening. Her name is Lindsay Gadd, and she's here, as well as Eric Smith is the engineer on this development that's going on this site. And then also we have Mr. Kevin Lloyd here of Rampart Surveys, and he's the one that put together the plat. So the proposal, the request is to subdivide the current Lot 1, which is 7.22 plus or minus acres, and this would be to subdivide it into 2 lots. Lot 1 would be approximately 5.24 acres, and this is where the proposed development for a farm, ranch, and tractor supply company development, which you'll hear about in the near future. You'll get to hear more about that in November through a CUP and site plan review request. And the other lot is going to be around 1.97 acres, and that lot will remain unimproved and then be sold at a later date. For when we review a subdivision request, the criteria we use is 17.24030. That's minor subdivision process, also the dedications process at 17.36, and design standards found at 17.40. This is our zoning map, and just to briefly tell you that this particular lot, Lot 1, is service commercial. That's our highest retail commercial zone available. And we are surrounded to the north and the south by commercial as well. To the north we have community commercial, to the south we have central business district, and then to the east and the west we have residential zones, urban residential found to the east, and then suburban residential with a couple of lots adjacent that are urban residential to the west. And of note, I would like to mention that the proposed development does fit to that particular zone district, and we'll talk more about that later on, of course. And this has a history of nearly 35 years of commercial, and I think I've put enough detail in your packets on that historical. This here is a bird's eye view of an aerial map of that lot, and as you can see, it is surrounded by several has frontage to several streets. Spruce Haven Drive to the north, and that's the street where the proposed development to Lot 1 would be accessed through. And to the east, of course, we have Highway 67. And then to the west we have Coraline, and then to the south we have unimproved Midland Avenue, and Midland Avenue will remain unimproved. This next slide here is how it exists today as L. Clifford Edition Lot 1. And most of note is that there are several easements already. To the east we have a 15-foot utility easement. To the south we have a 10-foot utility easement also to the north, and then to the west over here. This is the proposed final plat. We have Lot 1, that's that 5.24 acres where that development will be talked about and proposed in the near future, and then Lot 2 to the south. And of note, you'll notice that this easement here has increased to 20 foot. That is for a water extension line, a proposed water extension line through Lot 1. That line would eventually be extended later on through Lot 2 with whomever purchases that lot, but it's required that easement take place now through Lot 1. And then also we have several easements that were already made to this, standard easements, 10-foot public utility easements through the division line between Lot 1 and 2, as well as to the west of Lot 2. And one thing that I also want to note is that there are expected to be a couple more easements that might be necessary for fire hydrants and whatnot, and those will all take part. They're being discussed right now, actually, between the engineer and public utilities, as well as fire department. So you'll see more on that. But it is a condition of approval and final recording of the Mylar that these be worked through. So staff feels that this complies with that one condition, which I'll show you and read for you on the next slide. We found that the frontage to the four roads of right-of-way met the requirements, as well as the fact that the land is flat. There aren't very many topographically challenges and issues to consider with this, so it's suitable for subdividing. Unimproved Midland Avenue will remain unimproved. And the drainage report has already been submitted and reviewed by the city engineer, and it's been found acceptable with some basic updates and improvements. And you'll hear more again on that with the CUP and the site plan review later in November. and the lot dimensions do comply also with the minimum standards for the zone district. And also, Planning Commission did, of course, hear this through public hearing and approved unanimously. So it's staff recommendation that you approve with the following conditions, and I'll read these verbatim. Prior to City of Woodland Park recording the Mylar for this minor subdivision final plat, the applicant shall submit the following information. All necessary utility easements shall be provided to meet the needs of IREA and the City of Woodland Park, and any other easement needs that might come to light during site plan review as necessary to the development of the proposed retail structure. The L. Clifford Edition Filing Number 2 subdivision plat needs to be signed, dated, and affixed with a seal by surveyor after approval by City Council and submitted as a Mylar for signature and recording. Are there any questions of staff?
Council? Would the applicant like to come forward? It's not necessary.
If you have questions of Kevin Lloyd, he is here this evening from a technical standpoint. You could ask those questions. Also, Lindsay Gadd is here to answer any questions, but if you don't have any.
Do we have any questions?
Seems pretty straightforward.
Okay, if no further questions, is there any discussion by council at this point before we open up for public hearing? Okay, hearing none from council. It doesn't look like we have anyone signed up, but we will now hear anyone from public who would like to make a comment on this application. If you want to come to the podium, state your name and address. This is easy. Hearing none, back to council. We'll close the public hearing at this time. If there are no further questions of staff or discussion, we'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve it, subject to the conditions presented in the briefing.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right.
Motion is to approve with the conditions as submitted in the staff report. Brevetto?
Yes.
Carlson?
Yes.
Harvey?
Yes.
Matthews?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
All right, I'll now turn this back over to the Mayor Pro Tem.
All right. Thank you, Carol. All right, moving on to item number 10, new business. We have 3 items to consider this evening. The first is to consider Resolution 762 related to the Pikes Peak Regional Medical Center Association renewal and extension of the utility reimbursement agreement. And for that, we'll turn the discussion over to Kip Wiley, our Utilities Director.
Thank you. Good evening. Please bear with my voice tonight. I'm just getting it back. If you'll recall, October 3rd, you had a request to extend the Hospital Association reimbursement sewer extension. As directed by you, we prepared the resolution and with the attached amendment to the initial agreement. If you have any questions, I'd like to answer those. If not, I would recommend approval.
Any questions? I know that we had a good discussion last time as well. Any questions of Kip? No? Okay. Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
All right, we have a
762, I take it.
we have a motion to approve Resolution 762. Cindy?
Thank you. Carlson?
Yes.
Harvey?
Yes.
Matthews?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
Brevetto?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
All right, moving on to 10B. Consider Resolution 763 relative to 2 multifamily taps for 1310 and 1312 Longs Point, Sundance at Shining Mountain, filing number 1. And for that, we'll turn things back over to Kip.
Thank you. I'll try to get through this one as well. All right, Resolution 763 is a request by Mr. Brian Kane for 2 multifamily taps over at Sundance, Shining Mountain, which is just north of Woodland Valley Ranch Drive, back behind the bus barn. They have There was 29 multifamily taps originally approved. 8 have been constructed. The remainder of those were forfeited with no progress. And if you remember back in April, we did approve 2 more additional for a total of 10. This would be extending those 2. This same gentleman has purchased the other 2 taps, so he will have all 4. If you approve these 2, he will have 4 taps for the project. These units are approximately 3,000 square feet.
Nice.
They match what's existing, what's currently there. There was a resolution 380 adopted in 1997 that established 11 criteria. This project meets 9 of those criteria. And in the multifamily bank, there are currently 77 taps available right now. This would reduce that to 75. Any questions?
That was my only question, is how many were in the gene
bank?
pool? Whatever you want to call it. Sounds like we got plenty.
That's prolepsis. You can look that one up. Any other questions for Kip? No?
Make a motion to approve 763.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve Resolution 763. Cindy?
Thank you. Harvey?
Yes.
Matthews?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
Ravetto?
Yes.
Carlson?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
So now we'll turn to item 10C, which is presentation of the 2014 draft budget, delivery of the budget message, and review of General Fund 100, General Fund 210, debt service funds 310, 330, 340, and the Street Capital Improvement Fund 410. And as always on this topic, we turn to our leader, David Buttery.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. As you mentioned tonight, I will deliver the budget message, and we'll speak specifically to the general fund, the grant fund, debt service funds, and the street capital improvement fund. Of course, if you have some questions about other components of the budget, we would do our best to answer those, recognizing that at the November 7th meeting, we'll go into great detail on the DDA fund, the debt service funds, as well as water and wastewater. I'm going to not read the entire budget message as it was presented to you verbatim, but I am going to cover quite a bit of it for the benefit of the listening audience. We are extremely excited to bring you this proposed FY 2014 budget. As a city, we weathered the recession, fires, and flooding with minimal impacts to our city's financial well-being. We are on track to have a record-breaking year for sales tax and lodging tax revenue, while recognizing at the same time that our property tax revenue has declined. Homes are being built, commercial properties are being developed, and there seems to be a very positive buzz in the community. Your city staff has prepared a budget that is rock solid. There are no surprises or major adjustments in the O&M components of the budget. Our biggest challenge for 2014, as we discussed on Monday night, will be in determining what major expenditures we would like to make utilizing fund balances beyond those already programmed. Council has agreed in theory to maintain a general fund balance or an emergency reserve of 10% of true operating expenditures. Because of the opportunity for further direction by Council, this proposed budget leaves tremendous flexibility for the Council to direct utilization of funding beyond the 10% reserve. Your guidance will easily be incorporated into our final budget documents. Let's take a look back. After seeing our sales tax bottom out in 2009, we saw a strong recovery in 2010 and another improvement overall in 2011. Despite the Waldo Canyon fire, 2012 finished stronger than 2011 and was our best year ever. At the end of August 2013, we are 8.06% ahead of 2012 from a sales tax perspective, and we appear to be heading towards another record-breaking year. Again, we have seen a steady decline in property tax revenue, but fortunately that has been compensated for by increased sales tax revenue. For the first time in many years, we are working to keep our staff at full strength. For several years, we intentionally did not fill 3 vacant positions. We are operating with several shortages in some of our field crews. These positions have been filled, and much deferred maintenance has been accomplished as a result. Much of that deferred maintenance kept us out of trouble during the recent thunderstorms that we experienced the latter part of this summer. Let's take a look forward. Healthcare was a huge focus for 2012, and we believe we made significant progress by hiring a new broker and adjusting plan options. In 2013, we saw a minor increase that was reflected throughout the industry. The Affordable Care Act has presented us with new challenges as it relates to providing care for our employees and families. Decisions are being made daily at a national level that will impact our final decisions because national level decisions impact what providers will charge. We continue to work with our proven broker and hope to maintain the options that our employees currently have, or at least something very similar to what they have. Our healthcare broker aggressively represented us for 2013 and will continue to do so for 2014. Despite those best efforts, we still expect to see a 10% increase in overall healthcare cost. This 10% has two components that we are literally fine-tuning as you read this. In fact, Kelly and I meet with our broker on Monday morning at 8 o'clock, and we'll have some better numbers after that. The inflation rate that we are using for the 2014 budget is 2.77%, up from last year's by about a full percent. In 2013, you authorized a 3.0 pay for performance merit pool, allowing us to keep up with inflation, and provided a minimal pool for our pay for performance merit-based pay system. I am proposing a 4.0 pay increase pool of funds that will allow us to keep employees caught up with inflation and to provide an appropriate pool, again, for pay for performance. Teller County Commissioners terminated our long-standing intergovernmental agreement for the county to provide building department services for the city. We are currently developing that process as it must be in place by December 2nd, 2013. We don't fully yet understand the budget implications, but those will be fine-tuned as we move through the process. I state there, when I wrote this, as such, we have placed a healthy amount to ensure that we can fully provide superior service to our customers. We've got some better numbers that I'll share with you a bit later this evening. Our goal as the city staff is to present a budget that is balanced, respects our taxpayer dollars, and is easy to digest. We have presented a balanced budget for each department except as noted. We absolutely understand where these funds come from. We do not take this responsibility lightly. We believe that our taxpayers get great value for their hard-earned dollars. I'm going to talk just for a few moments about some of the specific funds. The general fund. I'm extremely pleased with how our business community and those that receive services from them have rallied since the Waldo Canyon fire. Businesses seem to be re-energized, visitors and customers are on the streets, and our sales tax revenue shows that. Budget year 2013 will finish very strongly. With projected savings of about $400,000 over budgeted expenses, we will have a projected fund balance of just over $3 million. This is great news. And remember that $3 million is made up of many different components. That's not our emergency reserve. I'll talk about that a bit later. Our 2014 budgeted revenue is a little more aggressive than years past, but not unduly so. Our 2014 budgeted expenses reflect gentle growth in our O&M areas, plus a few of some other areas worth mentioning. Based on earlier discussions, we have included another police officer to serve as a second school resource officer, a 4% increase in salaries and benefits for our pay-for-performance system, a 10% increase in health benefit costs, $110,000 for design for our fleet maintenance facility, and as of Monday night, $130,000 for Memorial Park design. As you review the general fund summary, you will see the year-end fund balance is a bit over $2.5 million. When we remove those parts that aren't liquid, we get down to about $1.4 million. That translates to about $42,000 being available for community investment, but we've inserted $34,000 as a placeholder pending further discussion. Economic and downtown development. Economic and downtown development have been exciting entities in 2013, and more excitement is in store for us in 2014. New buildings and businesses are coming online and more should open soon. Family Dollar, O'Reilly's have opened. Woodland Hardware is under construction. Walmack Industries is nearing completion and Trail Ridge Apartments have started. The O&M components of both budgets, economic development and DDA, have changed very little and look very strong. A greater emphasis on marketing in 2012 and 2013 has paid huge dividends for our businesses and therefore our city. We will increase those efforts in 2014. The Street Fund. The 410 Fund continues to be healthy and provides great return to our citizens. In 2013, more progress was made in our pavement management plan, as well as other repairs and improvements in our roadway infrastructure. In 2014, we will be able to do more. Approval of these items will allow us to continue with street resurfacing projects while also making gains on the associated drainage and multimodal components of our road network. Water Enterprise Fund. The Water Enterprise is in a stable operating situation that is expected to continue through 2014. Water system improvements completed over the last 2 decades have achieved improved water resources, storage, and treatment, such that the city's water surface capability is now comfortably ahead of the city's growth and development. No new major projects or large capital expenditures are needed in 2014 or the following years. The largest share of the annual water debt service and the annual contractual payment for the city's last water rights purchases will both be retired in 2015. I would say that we always are looking for opportunities for additional storage reservoirs. Know that even though it wasn't listed there, that is something that is in the forefront of our thinking. Building in Woodland Park continues to fall way below historical norms. We've sold only a few single-family water taps, 1 commercial tap, some multifamily taps, and we're only budgeting to sell 5 single-family equivalents in 2014. Wastewater Enterprise Fund. Very simply, the Wastewater Enterprise Fund is healthy and operations are in a stable condition. We know that at some point we're going to have to rebuild or build our new wastewater treatment facility. Because of a well-run wastewater treatment plant, we've been able to delay the construction of that. We have no debt in wastewater, so we're in a good position to fund that and to go into debt again should we need to build that facility. In conclusion, this budget, coupled with the comprehensive plan, is the proposed annual work plan and major policy document of the city. It provides funding for services, programs, and projects that can reasonably be accomplished in 2014. We believe that this proposed budget sustains our obligations to be good stewards of taxpayer dollars while providing a high level of service delivery. We have reasonable and responsible recommendations that we believe reflect the desires of the citizens of our city. After review and consideration, the City Council may wish to add or cancel or modify funded projects or activities prior to their adoption of the budget appropriation ordinance following a public hearing on Thursday, December 5th, 2013. Each year that I've presented the budget, I've presented a theme for the budget. In the late 2000s, we had themes of austerity. We had themes of concern. My theme for this year is that I think 2014 is a year of opportunity. It's a year of opportunity for the council to weigh in on great projects, and that leaves us very excited. Since Monday night, I have incorporated many of the things that we've talked about into new documents that Kelly will hand out to you at the end of the discussion tonight. I don't want them to become confusing with some of our items, but should those questions come up, know that we have redone those pages and we'll be able to hand those to you at the end of the evening. Very quickly, just as a review, recall I mentioned the Historical Society Foundation, that construction. We've added that back in 2013. We rearranged some things that were misslotted from the general fund to the 410 fund. We did insert the $130,000 for Memorial Park. Recall that we talked at our goals and objectives about doing windows and insulation in City Hall. We spent $20,000 on the first floor as a result of the restoration project from our flood. I have inserted into the budget funds to do the upstairs windows. It's about $55,000. If that doesn't fit in with your vision, that's something that we can remove. But it seemed to make sense from an energy perspective. If we're going to have that sealed up tight downstairs, we should take advantage of that and get it done upstairs as well. The adjustments to the building department. When we did the budget on the building department, we expected, based on historical documents for Teller County, that we would get a revenue of about $160,000. As Sally was going through the process of determining what the expenses might be, not knowing what source we would use, she put in a very conservative expense of $232,000. There's a big gap there. It was our goal for this to be revenue neutral. As we become closer in realizing what that opportunity will look like, we still think that the revenue stream will be about $160,000, but we don't think our expenses above that will be more than $15,000 to $20,000 for some software, for some hardware, for different things like that. It appears also that actually we may not see any of that money. It may just get to the person who's doing the work for us. We may have some overhead costs. So really we think that the cost for us absorbing that for this first year will only be about $20,000. Still a little fuzzy, but that's our best guess at this point. So with that, I would like to, Kelly's going to assist me as we go through this. In years past, council, we have not gone line by line. We've gone page by page. That's what I propose that we do, starting with the general fund. Recall that we have summaries soon after the budget message. I think we can skip over those and go straight to the funds, and then we can come back to the summaries as we need to. So I'm going to propose that we jump to page 1, which is the general fund revenues, and answer any questions that you may have on page 1. Mayor Pro Tem, if that's an acceptable approach?
We've done that in the past. I think it's worked very well. And, along the way, if you've got a question, we can ask questions and we can get through this fairly quickly. Bob? Yeah,
but there are some major comments made in the letter too, and so if we do have some questions about page C, for example,
sure,
can we ask those questions?
Absolutely.
Too?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I might say, why don't we get going on the budget, step through the funds, and then, if there's some comments or questions as it relates to the budget message, maybe we do that after, because some of them might get answered along the way.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
That's fine.
All right.
David, if I might, I'd like to bring up one more change that was made in the budget that I think is significant, and that is the change in the RLF, if you don't mind.
No, absolutely.
David and I visited today, and with the fortunate situation that we're in with our fund balance this year, we thought that it best to take all of the items that were scheduled in the RLF for 2014, where we spread those out and paid those back, and just pay those with cash this year. So if you'll notice on page L, there are no items budgeted for use of the RLF for 2014. And that corresponds
Kelly, they
to,
don't have the new pages.
No, you don't. I'm sorry. When you get your new pages, you'll see that on page L, those items that were scheduled for 2014 will be removed. And they will be reflected on page 8 as being cash expenditures for those items. When we get to that page, I'll point them out.
So part of that, it was about $106,000, and rather than spread that out over a bunch of years for some small items, we just felt, let's pay cash for them. And that way we can accomplish one of the other things we talked about Monday night, and that's building up the RLF for other uses.
Yep.
All right.
Thank you.
So,
well, last year we had a session on RLF, and we could see where it was spent and what the projections were for paying off vehicles and things like that in years. And so are we going to have another presentation just on the RLF?
RLF works in the very same way that was presented last time. The presentation was really a conceptual presentation on how the RLF works and the philosophy behind it. The actual numbers and the payback is located and detailed on page L of your budget books.
The new one.
Yes. You will
You
receive
had
that.
the old one, but we'll replace it tonight. And again, for the general fund, we've removed all expenditures from 2014 for the RLF.
The philosophy has remained unchanged, though.
Right.
And
If
that's
there-
what the presentation addressed.
And if you've got some specific questions on that, we'll be happy to work with you individually on that.
Yes.
Carol?
Okay, if we're starting now on the general fund, I have a general question.
Yes, ma'am.
From the budget message itself, can you summarize what the Affordable Care Act impacts have been on our health care program?
Yeah, I'm going to do it very generally, knowing that Monday we'll have some better information, and at our November 7th meeting, we'll be able to flesh that out a bit more. But right now, what it looks like is that the plans that we offer our employees aren't going to be available unless at an extremely high cost, a cost that the city can't afford and our employees can't afford. So to get a similar plan, we felt those would be unreachable from our budget perspective. So we're looking at plans that provide as close to similar benefits as our existing plan. Co-pays have gone up, deductibles have gone up, and so we're trying to match plans with budgets as closely as we can. You're familiar with, and I don't want to, I beg your permission to not go into a bunch of detail because we really are still piecing it together, but you're familiar with health savings accounts? Yes. There's also programs called
Health reimbursement
health
arrangements.
reimbursement accounts, an HRA, and that's what we're pursuing to hopefully take the edge off some of the cost for the city and for the employees.
And, you know, every year I guess I give some anecdotal, because, you know, my company, we go through this every year, and we're about 120 employees, so it's very similar to the city. 10% is a pretty good number. Our company's seeing an increase at 21%. And I asked specifically what percentage was attributable to the Affordable Care Act, and it was 5%. So 25% of the additional cost is due to the Affordable Care Act in our situation. So I think at a 10% bump, that's actually not too bad considering. And there's other components that go into that. I mean, a big component from our perspective, and I know it's the same way with the city, is how many claims. They look at claims, and they look at claims over $10,000, and they look at how many claims you've had over $10,000, and you know, and how big the claims are and what the claims are, and you know, so that feeds in to that. So just to give you a little bit of measuring stick, maybe.
We will not forget that question, and again, after our
Yes.
discussion on on Monday, at November 7th, we can speak more about the health care.
Okay, thank you.
Yes,
Bob?
ma'am.
I appreciate that too. I don't want to get into details, but all right, the Affordable Care Act for the individual things where you can sign up online has bronze, silver, gold, and platinum levels as far as levels of care you want to pay for. And for our edification, what level are you kind of targeting right now? What level? What would we be similar to?
I don't think I can answer that question very accurately. I will tell you that prior to 3 or 4 years ago, I would say that we had a very, very good health care plan, probably a gold. I don't know. I'm not that familiar with how to compare those. We may still be in the silver range. Again, I'd ask, let us have our meeting on Monday, and maybe I can answer that question better.
Okay.
Yeah, I think a question you could ask the insurance broker would be, how do we compare to other municipalities, or you know, where do we kind of rank? That's probably better, so we can get a better sense.
Okay.
Gary?
Yeah, as I understand it, the major difference between the bronze, silver, and gold has to do with deductibles and
co-insurance.
basically, and that's it.
And
Okay,
probably
we'll do
premiums.
We'll do our best to answer that.
All right. Any other questions from a general perspective? I mean, we can come back to budget message questions, and maybe we can get some of those answered as we move through. You have a burning question?
Not a burning question. It's just before I fade out here because of the Percocet here,
Oh, okay.
I wanted to have an opportunity, with your permission, to present 3 things about the general fund that I think may have some relevance, and I'd like to get some sort of decision on, or something, consensus on at least. So if you allow me, I'll be able to do that. If not, then I guess I won't.
Of course, we want to give you that opportunity.
Okay, great. One thing, and as a general, I think, Dave, you mentioned that the cost of living increase you mentioned was 2.7%, I believe it was.
The inflation rate,
Inflation.
2.77%.
Yet the people who are on Social Security and all that stuff are getting 1.5%. So they're basing it on a 1.5% increase. I don't know how that factors into your decision on giving 4% to your employees, but you know.
We use a very consistent rate for a period of time that goes from the middle of last year to the middle of this year. And if you were to compare the Social Security percent increases with ours, they might be offset a little bit. We use the Denver Boulder Greeley Consumer
Price Index.
Consumer Price Index
for all
unit.
urban areas.
So it's more specific to our area, where Social Security may be, it's a national average.
And I understand that CPI doesn't in no way reflect how much the real true cost of living increase is. It's obviously a lot, considerably more than what they're indicating here, obviously.
It's an index.
Okay, so that's fine on that. One thing, I want to be able to take advantage, and you mentioned the opportunities we have in 2014, and I want to be able to take advantage of some opportunities. We've been working behind the scenes, at least I have and a few others in here, Brian, working behind the scenes for the last year and a half on a number of things I would like to share with you and maybe get some consensus of whether I should continue in this direction or not, because I'm just as willing to continue in that direction or drop it. I'm not one of those guys that have to, have something carry on infinitum if you guys don't back me up. One of the things is, you've all heard me talk about the Main Street program, and it's an excellent program. I don't know if I want to repeat basically what the advantages are to us as a community to be part of that Main Street program. Brian's more eloquent at that to be able to explain the advantages we have. But we do have an opportunity here to really affect our town in a very significant way by implementing that Main Street program. We've already submitted our application, but part of that application is to have a community assessment. That community assessment is done by an independent agency downtown, Colorado Inc. Inc. And they come up here for 2 or 3 days, and they interview lots of people, and they do an assessment on where we are now in Woodland Park and where we want to go. And a major portion of that would obviously be the comprehensive plan, as well as other things. But it will give us a snapshot image of where we want to go. That's required as a candidate of the Main Street program, is to have that assessment. It costs about $10,000. I would like to see maybe part of that reserve that we do have set aside, $10,000, as a placeholder. I'm not saying we'd use it all. We may have matching funds from other things, but I'd like to see that put in there, set aside, so that we can get that assessment done and get us on the way. The assessment would be done in January of 2014. And I want to know if I got buy-in from you guys, because I've been working with this for a while, and I don't want to spin my wheels for nothing. So I just like to know where you guys stand on that. I think I can give you certainly a lot more information on what advantages the Main Street program provides us, but I think many of you do know what those advantages are. I can go into more detail if you'd like, but I think it's a very wise investment of our money as a placeholder to be able to make that happen. And once again, we have revenue sources from other sources as well, but we have a true faith effort by the city that we're buy-in to this Main Street program, and I think that will tell the rest of the certainly Main Street community that we have buy-in.
So why don't we stop there? You said you had one more item, I think. So we'll stop there. Why don't we talk about that briefly? Bob?
I think that's a great idea. I mean, this is a minor investment within the noise level almost. And it gives us a state recognition of what we're doing as a city. It's kind of like a baseline of, where we stand vis-a-vis other cities, and some ideas of maybe how to do it better. So I would support that.
Ken?
I would support it. I think whether it's a placeholder or not, we're not obligated to spend it later. If for some reason it doesn't develop, but I think if we have it there, it makes sense. And I think it does demonstrate the city's further involvement in promoting our community and our downtown development.
Carol?
And keep in mind too, just one other thing, keep in mind too that the board of directors get chosen, as we're going through this process now, getting a board of directors to do this. And with 3 organizations that I mentioned to you before, there's an organization committee, a design and development committee, economic committee, and a promotion committee. Those 3 big basic divisions are there. And that has to be approved by city council. So those board members have to be approved by city council, and that's our buy-in, basically.
Well, you had me until that. I'm just kidding. Go ahead, Carol.
Well, I guess the only point I want to make, I support it as well, is do we need to do that tonight? We have, at this point, $699,000 minus that amount that we talked about on Monday night. Do we need to identify these placeholders tonight?
Only in the sense that when we update the documents, as we make changes, we would incorporate that so that the final budget that we present to you at the last meeting in November, in the initial posting, would have all the accurate numbers. So it sounds to me like you're leaning that direction. I would want to put it in so that we have the full numbers.
And I have a comment I'd like to make. I don't know enough about it, what the advantages are and that sort of thing, Gary. I know you're passionate about it. I know Brian's worked on it. I think it's great. Before we spend the money, just like we've said to the WAP and others, I would like to understand what the benefits are. And so I'm okay with putting a placeholder, but I wouldn't want to move forward with actually writing the check until such time as I had a better understanding of what the benefits are and why are we spending the $10,000.
That certainly, Brian can put that together. We can have it at a meeting, and that's easy to do.
And I'm happy to do a work session, an hour before council if we need to, or whatever. But I don't think that's for us to necessarily figure out tonight. So I'm okay with putting it as a placeholder, but I don't want to see the money spent until council has an opportunity to hear the benefits.
And I know Gary's got a couple of other initiatives that he would like us to consider as well, and I would suggest that we do the same thing with those again.
Well, I think we should hear what those are and discuss those maybe. Because we might not all feel the same way, maybe.
That's true.
As on the other ones. All right, well, I think
you've got to understand this money is money that's leveraged.
Hang on, yep, I got you.
And I got it.
I think, yeah, so I think you got from council, we'd like to put that in the budget and have some kind of work session going forward.
Got it. Thank you.
All right, next one.
That. Next one I have is something you guys might not be too familiar with, but we've been working on it for about 1.5 years now, behind the scenes, and it has to do with the wastewater treatment facility and their expansion plan that they have in being. Have a couple of elements of that. One is we want to be able to develop a revenue stream from that wastewater treatment facility. What we're not doing right now, many of us have septic tanks, for instance. Well, right now, it costs about $300, $350 to pump a tank. I wasn't aware of the fact until they told me how much of that $350 goes to Colorado Springs Utilities for them to dump that. And we pay about $250, the major about $250 a piece on that. And part of that expansion facility, I think, would be to provide an opportunity for those septic people, and they'd love to do it, to dump up here, and we get the revenue stream from that. So that's part of that process. But beyond that, there's something else that's interesting, and I've talked about it in the past, is a biomass facility. I don't want to get too technical on you, and one of my jobs in the Air Force was to break down some very highly complex technical issues to something that people can understand. So I'm going to attempt to do that right now. Right now, in the waste treatment facility, all the waste that we have, the effluent we get from the sewers and all that stuff, gets collected through an aerobic process, and it breaks down the bacteria. And then what we do is we clean the water up, put it back into Fountain Creek and streams. I'm wrong on some of this stuff, Kip, let me know. Then the other part of it is that we're able, other part of, huh? Trout Creek, yeah. And then the other part of that is what we get from the end result of that breakdown, if you will, is a compost material, which what we're doing right now is giving it to the residents of Woodland Park. Anybody wants to pick up a very highly concentrated compost material. Okay. Well, I stumbled across a process about 2 years ago on actually squeezing more out of that effluent we got than you could possibly imagine. And one of the things, as an attached facility to this waste treatment plant, is called a biomass facility. Think of it as a big vat, like a water tank.
Gary?
Yeah.
Look, I don't want to cut you off, but, I mean, this is a very technical discussion, and I guess what's the punchline as it relates to the
Punchline
budget?
is, we're able to now be able to produce gas, methane gas, from what we don't do now. We can trap that gas in a container, get that methane gas, take that gas and power the generator, the electric generator, plus having a heat source from the for the generator to make the water treatment plant self-sufficient.
Okay.
We pay for the electric bill, we pay for the heating of the plant and all that stuff. That's the beginning stage of it. That's the least we can expect that is. And through working through other organizations like Sturban Industries, we can get a very efficient generator.
So, but once
and
again,
do that
what
stuff.
is the punchline as it relates to the budget? Because
Rates
I've
of
got
budget, we need to have, we've got the design, and we need to have a preliminary design review to understand how much benefit we can get from this byproduct that we were able to get, which we're not taking advantage of now, and find out what the cost benefits are. So we needed to do a preliminary design review to do that. And I'd like to do that in 2014.
Okay.
So what I want to be able to do, once again, as a placeholder, and you get briefings on this before, I'd like to dedicate maybe $20,000 to maybe make that happen, to get that preliminary design review. Once again, it's going to cost more than that, but we're going to have buy-in from DOLA and these other agencies. But we need a good faith effort on our part to say that this is the direction we want to go into. It makes sense to us, and we want to pursue further ahead on this. We still have a lot of work to do, but I just want to put it as a placeholder. I'm not suggesting that we're going to spend the money, but I want it there in case you guys, after you see our briefing, say, yeah, that looks really cool for us, and that'll put us, in a really good state to make that facility self-sufficient, and even later on, actually provide another additional revenue stream.
Sure. And as we maybe discuss this item, I'm going to make a suggestion and maybe lead this discussion. We have a utility advisory committee that 2 members of council, Ken sat on it for many years, Mayor Turley and I sit on it now. I think this is the perfect thing for there to be a discussion at the utility advisory committee. And then we can look into costs. I mean, we can always add things, but to me this is a very technical issue, and I think it maybe should be vetted there first, and then it could be vetted here further, and then if we wanted to allocate money. I mean, all the things you talk about are great. I'm glad you're passionate about it. I think we should just probably take it through that process. That's my feeling, and not necessarily put that in the budget.
Well, I just want to know what your commitment is, because this takes a lot of work on my part, and I don't want to be blowing my time for nothing. If you want to shut this thing down now, I'll shut it down now, and I won't do anything more.
Yeah, and I don't think
Anything
that's.
more. I just want to know what your buy-in is, whether you support me in this effort or not. That's all I really want.
Well, and my feeling is I think it's great. I think the Utility Advisory Committee is a great place to start this process. Bob?
Yeah, this really belongs to the 510 account. Utility Advisory Committee screens that account because the revenues come from our water sewer.
That's true. It's probably not. It's not a general fund account.
No, it's not a general fund issue, and so it may increase our water sewer fees by a couple %. But on the other hand, it might reduce the heating costs of the plant. But it's up to you guys to screen it and see if it makes sense. So yeah, I agree with you completely.
We can add that to a upcoming UAC agenda.
Ken, did you have something?
Well, I was just going to support that. I think that's a good place for it. It's a very technical issue, Gary, as you pointed out, and I think we need to know more about it as we do some of the other things. But I think the UAC is the appropriate place to bring that about and learn more about the whole process and what it's ultimately going to cost and what it could end up saving us. I just think we're a little premature to stick it right in the budget now, because we can do it again later if we're talking 10 or 20,000, right? I don't think that's a big deal.
Yep.
I support that.
Yeah, so please don't take away from this that we don't support that. I mean, I think every one of us here thinks those are all great ideas. I just think the right avenues, and I think others feel, is to take it through the UAC. So I would challenge Kip to put that on a UAC meeting soon, and let's keep it going. All right.
Last thing?
Yep.
Which may or may not have anything to do with the general fund, but you mentioned that.
We'll let you know.
Yeah, I figured you would. The SROs. You have presently in the budget for 2 SROs right now, is that coming out of the general fund, or is the second SRO coming out of the general fund?
Both come out of the general fund.
Okay, fine. My only consideration, I don't want to say passionate about this, but I think really, and I mentioned to this to you guys before, I feel one of our major responsibilities as a council and as city representatives and good stewards of the taxpayers' money, I think that one of the things that we should provide topmost of all is safety of the community. And I think that's our responsibility to do that. And so therefore, I'm a firm believer that the SRO should be the main responsibility of the city. I know you made an agreement to some degree with the RE2 to have them share costs of that. I'm inclined to think we shouldn't have to share costs. I think we should pick up the entire tab because I think that's our real big responsibility. RE2 has enough things to think about. I'd like to keep teachers and not get rid of teachers because we don't have the money for it. But they're strapped right now, and I think that's our primary responsibility. And I would like you folks to maybe back me up on this to suggest to you that SR is our primary responsibility for the kids in this community, for the 2 schools. I think we should have 4, but 2 is what we can probably handle. And it's very critical that SRO, his statement of work, I think we need to take a look at that statement of work as a council and make sure we're getting what we're paying for. And that's the thing that I'm really heavy on. What are we getting? What we're paying for? And also an input from us to the people who choose to select these SROs. It's a very critical position. That person has to have a certain personality and a proven track record.
Okay.
Being able to.
Okay. I think we got it. So I don't know if there's any comments that want to be made. Ken?
Well, I would say what we discussed Monday night, I would be more in support of. It's in support of this person, but on a scale, as we discussed, where we're paying more up front and it goes down. I forget the exact numbers you had. As we see how it works out, I'm okay with the school having a buy-in. I don't see a problem with that, and with us helping get it started right up front with more money and then backing off just a little bit until we got down to, what was it, 80-20 or something at the end?
20/80.
20/80.
Correct.
I'm fine with that, Gary. I know you want to do the whole thing, but I'm okay with that concept.
Yeah, and I think to be clear, what is in this budget is to fund 2 SROs completely, 100%, from the city of Woodland Park.
First year.
And, the agreement with the school district is that we would continue to fund 1 SRO, 100% the city, and that over a period of time, the school district would help offset the cost of the second SRO to the point that eventually it would be a 20% city, 80% RE2. So we'd still fund 100% of one and 20% of another. And I'm very comfortable with that approach as well. And any given year, if things aren't working out with the district or whatever, they always have the option to come back to the city. And the next, councils always have the opportunity to do something different in the future. So, Bob?
Yeah, I think we jumped ahead on the pages, but so since we're on the subject, I would agree with Ken and yourself. But one thing that wasn't mentioned in our earlier discussions was we talked about the district superintendent, but we never heard anything about the school board. So I would like to make sure that the school board also approves of this arrangement, okay, because they're over the district superintendent, okay? So that's the only thing I could add to what we said on the subject already.
Yep. So to be clear, for this year, it's 100% of 2 positions that we're going to pay for, or next year, 2014, for SRs. And the other thing is, I would make a statement that, you know what, I think Chief Larson, his group does a tremendous job of hiring people and figuring out what their responsibilities should be. And I would rather not get into personnel discussions as it relates to what their duties are or anything like that, where they should be, what they should be doing. I think we leave that up to the very capable hands of Chief Larson, and we don't micromanage.
We're buying the position. I'd like to at least give a guidance on what we feel, the specific duties of an SRO. what we feel comfortable with.
And I would just say.
But I'm not suggesting I would hire him. No, he's not hiring.
I'm
But
just-
we need to give him guidance on what we feel
I-
would be a biggest bang for our buck.
I think there are some legal implications with that.
Well,
I just don't think I mean, personally, I don't think that's our role. Our role is to, approve a spot, approve a budget, and we have staff that's very capable. They know what the requirements are much better than we do. I would suggest, Gary, if you have some specific things, talk to Chief Larson offline, and I just don't want to see us as council start getting into staffing decisions as to what job duties are, or how much time they spend here, or how much time there. That's not our job, in my opinion.
The only other comment I would make, though, about 2014 and our commitment to 100% funding for the 2 positions, the school does have an opportunity to receive some grant money in 2014 as a startup, and we welcome that, I'm sure.
and recall that the school district is going to fund the initial equipping and training costs associated, well, equipping for sure, of the second SRO, which is about an $8,000 price tag. So just for clarification.
Could I make a short comment about guidelines?
Absolutely.
The state of Colorado has passed a law establishing the Peace Officer Standards and Training Board to set guidelines for what the job will be, what it won't be, what the training is, and what it won't be. And we will be bound by that. We also use the national and state school resource officer associations, and we also use the information from the superintendents groups that do the same thing. And that's where we get where we build our job description from. That was it.
Thank you.
I think earlier discussion, though, was Gary was very passionate about that officer being dedicated 100% of its time to the school as opposed to being pulled off for emergencies. So I think this is something that we need to resolve at some point this fall as to whether or not we could give that kind of guidance.
There really is no resolution. That's an operational decision. That's my responsibility. You can certainly decide to fund or not fund, but when it comes to the operational components, particularly of the police department, that's the staff's jobs. That's the police chief's job. What I'll tell you is that the SRO's primary duty is in the school. If there's an issue that is going to cause the chief of police to pull all of his officers to another location for some reason, and it's not just a terrorist attack, it could be anything, the chief of police must have the ability to do that and cannot be bound by a requirement that says a person must stay at a particular place. I don't impose that. I would not want you to do that either.
And I can accept that.
I agree.
Gary, are you okay?
Any other issues related? Gary, anything else?
No, that's all I have.
All right. All good stuff. All right. Now listen, we're trying to get through page 1.
Well, my comment has to do with all the sections on expenditures, O&M expenditures, okay? So Gary brought up, or somebody brought up, the percent for inflation, okay? But I do have one question with regard to, the personnel system.
Okay.
Is it all right for me to bring up so we can not nail that down?
I think you're gonna bring it up at some point, so we might as well now.
Because this gets rid of each section having to bring up the subject. Or since we're at the first section, I'll bring it up. I noticed on the last page of the budget something that is very familiar to me as a GS employee. You have like grade levels here, and then you have the range of the for us it would be step increases, and so is this very similar to what the federal government does?
No,
or?
not at all. This comes from a consolidation of information that's gleaned from multiple municipalities. They're all a little bit different, but normally in municipalities there are grades, there are not steps. We don't recognize a step system, here in Woodland Park at least. Other municipalities may. That's how they choose to do it. But also remember that we don't have the multitude of employees in a particular position that larger cities have. We have several police officer 1, several police officer 2. We have several maintenance worker 1, several maintenance worker 2s. But everything else is just a little bit different. So we don't have a lot of redundancy in grades. But we have a minimum, a maximum, and a midpoint. And we won't hire anyone below the minimum unless they don't meet a certain criteria. We won't hire someone above the maximum unless they have particular skill sets that are valuable to us. What I'll tell you is that typically we hire people somewhere between the minimum and 33% into the range, depending on their qualifications. More professional certification, we reward that. We reward that experience. What we do on an annual basis, though, is we do a pay-for-performance system that we've had in place since about 2009, where we do performance evaluations on every single employee, and I rack and stack those across the city, and based on their performance and how they compare to others, they are awarded a pay increase. So it can range everything from 0 to the highest I think I've ever given was 6.5%. But it just depends on the employee.
Okay. So there is not an increase based on longevity in the
No.
job or anything like
No.
that. So when last year we authorized that 3% additional for that merit pool, it wasn't evenly divided, and it didn't affect their base pay per se. It was really bonuses.
No.
No.
No, it did affect their base pay. It was not bonuses. It absolutely was a pay increase.
Based on performance.
Based on performance.
Correct.
Not a flat across the board.
Yeah.
There were 2003, 2004, there were, instead of pay increases, there were bonuses given. And we've gotten away from that system. We think the pay for performance merit-based pay system is an extremely sophisticated approach to reward employees for good work and to motivate others to achieve higher expectations.
Okay. So last year we gave about 3% for this pool, and this year you're proposing about a little over 1% then.
Four.
The total.
Well, the inflation is
Last year, the
part of it,
inflation
isn't
rate
it?
was 1.78,
right.
and the pool was 3%.
Right.
So there was about a 1.22% pool, if you will, the difference between those two. This year, the inflation rate is 2.77. I'm asking for a 4% pool, so the actual difference is 1.23%. So it's almost identical to the delta for a true pay-for-performance pool.
Right. Well, reading on page C, it does say, I'm proposing a 4% pay increase pool of funds to keep employees caught up with inflation and to provide an appropriate pay pool.
Right.
So out of that 4%, then 2.77 is just to catch up for inflation, and then the 1.23 would be for the pool?
That is correct.
Yeah, okay.
But there's no guarantee that every employee gets the 2.77% increase in inflation. With this system, we have terminated employees. Just the pay-for-performance system and the evaluation process, if they continue to need improvement in certain areas, we don't keep them around. And so that's one way to get their attention, is to say nothing, because we need to get their attention.
Yeah, I just wanted to understand the system, because this was really covered in depth by the previous council in 2011, I guess, where they really looked into the personnel system in depth.
That was really 2008, 2009. We've had it in place since then.
Okay. My only concern, and I think you can assure me, is that when we have there was a little bit of relief in the constrained situation we've had in the past. There's a tendency to spend more money, and you can assure me that you're basically trying to keep, not increase the O&M budgets of the various departments by more than, slightly over inflation.
Well, and I guess that's our discussion, and I mean, I'll just throw it out. Everybody's talking percentages. I mean, does anybody have an issue as it relates to the inflationary rate that we've identified, the percentage for the pool? I mean, does anybody have any heartburn over any of that? Because that's really the question. If the answer is yes, let's talk about it. If it's not, let's move on.
Well, is it 2.7, figure you want to use, or is it more like what everybody else is getting, 1.5?
Or is it more like at my company where we're not getting any?
Yeah,
So, I mean, whatever. The question is, does anybody, in the past, we've used the Boulder, whatever, CPI. We're using the same CPI we've always used. That's very consistent. And, splitting hairs of why Social Security's only get 1.5, I mean, I have no idea other than they probably figured out how they could do it. Because they do chain CPI, I think, which takes out other things. So do we have any issues as it relates to the 2.77% and how we've established that? Do you have an issue, Bob?
No, the 1% increase from 3 of last year to 4 of this year is basically the increase in inflation, which use the Boulder CPI, which applies to our, for Colorado's, which applies to us. So I have no problem with that.
All right. Anyone else? Because it's fundamental to the discussion.
That's why I had to bring it up.
It's fine. All right. Any other general questions, or we'll go to page 1? All right.
So,
Page
Mayor
1.
Pro Tem, if I may I lead us through this?
Please.
Any questions on page 1 as it relates to general fund revenues? Yes, Bob.
In the past, your practice under the third line down, sales tax 2%, your practice, the 2013 year-end projection, you've always made the 2014 budget request the same as the 2013 year-end projection, at least the last couple years. So I was just wondering why you've deviated from your normal conservatism on coming up with that number.
Yeah, that may have been true. No, it actually wasn't even true last year.
I think we've always
well,
said
yes,
that.
it was. I beg your pardon. The year-end projection was, and that I think it's because of the confidence that I have in the economy and past history. I think 2013 was probably an anomaly. In the early days, 2000 to 2007, generally the rate of increase for revenue was about 4%. When we hit 2007, that was not a good approach. Neither was it in 2008. So we started looking at other ways to analyze this. So last year, I said that the 13 budget would be the same as the year-end projection, which was extremely conservative. This is a year of opportunity. Last year was still, in my opinion, kind of a year of recovery, a year of gaining confidence. So that's the logic that we use to come up with that approach.
And do you disagree with seeing with budgeting a little more revenue?
I have no problem with that. I just wanted to know how the rationale, and then in how he calculated the 3108 as opposed,
The 3108 was the 2.77% inflation. And recall that at our budget work session, I used the terminology true economic growth, which was the average of inflation minus sales tax, and that was that 1.37% number. So I added the 1.37 to the 2.77 and came up with 4.14%. So the 3108413 is 4.14% more than the 2013 projected. So it's, again, a bit more aggressive than what we've done in the past.
Okay, that's fine.
Anything else on page 1? Moving along to page 2, the last page in our general fund revenue projections. Any questions or comments there?
Well,
yes, sir.
These are basically summaries of the following sections where you have the revenue and expenditures by department. So if we raise questions that might come back. And
this is just general fund revenue. So there, you will not see these revenues reflected any place else in the general fund budget. The rest of the general fund pages are expenses by department.
Right.
These are revenues by line item that we receive in the general fund.
Okay. Very well.
The summary sheets for each fund are behind the budget message, which is what I think that you're referring to.
Okay. Well, I have a general question then. You show the total revenues of $7,063,000 and $876.
Yes.
And then you show total expenditures of $7,557,921.
Right.
With a delta, we're in the hole by $494,045. In other words, we're not, according to those two numbers, we're not balancing the budget. So
correct.
So Perhaps you
Let
can
me just,
explain that.
yep, I'll comment on that. By law, we don't have to balance a budget each year for revenues earned and expenses made. What we're required to do is to not exceed, have expenditures exceed the reserve plus revenues. You can't do that for many years, but you can do it as needed. And so when I mentioned that we had some budgets that didn't balance, this was one of those. Now, because of some of the changes that we made on Monday night, the new sheets that you will get, we have closed that gap significantly so that revenues actually exceed expenses by $20,000. So the next sheets you get will take care of that. But also remember that a year or two ago, you allowed us to do some spending out of the reserve fund for matches on Fountain Creek for unique capital projects. For O&M, we're still in good shape. Okay. Any other questions on page 2 revenues? Then if we could, let's jump to page 3, which is legislative expenses. Any questions there? My only comment would be in the community investment, I put a placeholder of $34,000. The new calculation, based on the sheet you'll get tonight, would have that be about $37,000. We'll fine tune that in the last iteration based on other inputs that you may have. Every time you add an expense, the amount that we can dedicate to the community investment fund by our adopted formula goes down. So this is a reasonable placeholder for now. Yes, sir.
One of the things we encountered last year's budget is that for the legal services, we basically lumped the prosecutor and our city attorney into one line item. And so there are two distinct things. One is legislative, serving the council here, and one is under the court system. Is it possible just for, regularization of this to, in fact, identify those into two separate budgets?
If the council wants us to, sure. Historically, we had one law firm that provided both services.
Right.
We put it under one number.
Right.
That if
But this
the
is
council wants
accounting
us
in the
to,
right place. It's just a matter of accounting.
Is it your pleasure to have it within this legislative department, or have the prosecutor reclassified into the court budget? Is that
would be
what you're asking?
The idea, yeah. Because you've got two totally different functions.
Okay.
I mean, that makes no difference to me, but
I would recommend we do that as well.
it's fine.
Since it is two different
Okay.
expenses.
All right. Anything else on page 3? David?
Page 4, administration. Questions there? Okay. Page 5, municipal
I
court.
do have a question.
Okay.
What is this North Teller Bag funding match?
North Teller Build a Generation is our Build a Generation program that is a youth problem prevention program that we've had here in the city since 1998 or 1999. And the position is partially funded by grants and partially funded by the city.
And so this is the city's part of that.
Correct.
And it also includes the operations for the teen center.
That's right.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay. Page 5. For municipal court, this is where we will insert the prosecutor's expenses.
Yes, sir.
Page 6, planning. Yes, sir.
Yeah, you previously mentioned in the introduction that the building department services would be a lot closer to being revenue neutral than you have in the original budget request. But when we had the meeting with all the contractors and folks, you said it would be revenue neutral, and including we were thinking at the time of maybe having one person here that would take phone calls to find out what the status of there was. So there may have been some part-time city employee involved in there, but the commitment at the time was that the total fees charged would cover the total expenses. It was supposed to be revenue neutral. I know $10,000 or $15,000 isn't much to worry about, but I was just wondering the thought process in doing that.
Well, again, I don't, if I made the commitment that, well, I do not believe I made the commitment that it would be revenue neutral. I believe I made the commitment that we would try to achieve that. What the $20,000, and so I want to reiterate that again, it was our goal to have it revenue neutral because we had absolutely no idea what the costs were going to be.
Right.
What we're finding as we go through this process is that the fees that will be paid will be very similar to what Teller County charges right now. The entity that we're going to go with will charge the same fees. They will receive 100% of those fees. That's the way their contracts are typically written. But they will also provide people up here in the office.
Okay.
What the cost for us will be for some software and for perhaps some hardware to manage the process as it comes through. So it's kind of our upfront cost. I don't know if it will be an annual expense, but it will be significantly less than what we thought it was going to be. For the consumer, it will. Our hope will be is that it is revenue neutral. The cost should be the same for them is the point I'm trying to make. So we are going to subsidize it initially to get it started.
Are we going to have a separate session to talk about the final arrangements on the building committee? I know you recommended that we go with the firm that does Colorado Springs, but are we going to discuss the final arrangement, for instance? With
It was not my intent to do that.
Okay. Then I have a question since we're on this subject. I happen to volunteer at Habitat in building those houses and happened to be there when the Teller County inspector came to make sure that our foundations had the right rebar, etc. And you know, I got into a little conversation, like for instance, buildings that we've already paid the fees for, and Teller County has received the money. Doesn't it make sense that we get value for the fees we paid, and either in the services of letting the building inspectors continue with that particular building, or if we don't let the inspectors finish and have our own service, will we get money back from Teller County for the fees that we have paid?
The short answer is yes. We are addressing those issues with Teller County, and we don't believe our customers will get lost in the transition, nor will they have to pay more, nor will they lose time.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else on page 6?
Page 7, general support. Page 8, general capital. And this is one of the pages where you will see some changes in the new one. We mis-slotted some things as it related to the City Hall Park and Ride. The traffic planning, those should all have been in 410. We've redone that. But again, those are some things you'll see in the new sheets. But other questions on that? Then let's zoom ahead.
Hey,
Yes, sir.
Bob had a question.
Those were precisely one of the things I was going to catch, but I'm glad you caught it already and taken care of it. Thank you.
To be specific, when you look at your new sheets, you'll see expenses there, but they are offset by transfers into the general fund from the 410 fund in your revenues on page 2.
For example, the $110,000 for the design for fleet maintenance, because we capitalize projects, we have to capitalize them under a particular line item. So you see an expense in the general fund for the 110, but also recall that other funds, 410, 510, 520, reimburse us monies for operations. So they are paying their fair share, as we talked about on Monday night. It just shows up in this one line because we have to do that.
So wherever there is an expense to another account, the other account shows a credit.
That's correct.
Double entry.
That's correct. Finance Department, page 9. Parks, Buildings, and Grounds, page 10. This is easy. Special Gaming Impact, 11.
Bob?
Yeah, we haven't received any special gaming impact funds since 2010. And at the time, we were receiving this money, I believe we hired a bunch of police officers, or what are these expenses for? I mean,
It funds 5 police officers from patrol. We've accounted for them separately over the years because of the fact that we had to either report statistics associated with gaming revenues and the use of those, or we had to compete for funding through DOLA and with some agencies around. We have not had the impacts that we've had in the past to really feel good about putting our hat in the ring to compete for the funding from gaming. I continue to account for them here if those situations change so that we can recapture data and keep the data collected in the event that we can reapply at some point in the future.
that was my question, is if we don't think we're ever going to get any of this money, why don't we just put it in the police operations budget, because that is police.
But are you satisfied with?
But if we have some hope that at some point by accounting for this separately of getting some revenue for this, then I can understand for continuing to account for it that way.
It's really labor neutral. It's done automatically through our payroll system, through cost centers. So if you're concerned that it causes extra accounting, it really doesn't. It just gives us the opportunity to capture that data if we need it instead of having to dig it out.
Okay.
So, but whatever is the pleasure of the council, that's.
Any other questions on page 11?
Then we're going to page 12, information systems. Page 13, economic development. You'll note in the last line in economic development is the visitor center contract. By contract with the Greater Woodland Park Chamber of Commerce, an amount was determined many years ago as to what a fair share would be to augment their revenue stream for them to run the visitor center for us. And the agreement was that it would increase every year based on the Denver Boulder CPIU. So the 2014 amount is 2.77% more than the 2013 amount. It's a pretty simple math problem. Yes, sir.
Yeah, the biggest difference is in fact the business recruitment investment. You talked about that earlier, is very good value for money. Brian's doing an excellent job using that money and attracting businesses here. So I support that whole item.
Okay. Page 14, cultural center. Mm-hmm. 15, police operations. (16) Public Works Administration. Page 17, Fleet Maintenance.
Bob?
Yeah, I noticed that the vehicle maintenance streets, vehicle maintenance water treatment, vehicle maintenance, et cetera, it shows the work that is performed for the various departments on actually maintaining the fleet.
Right.
To me, those are, in a sense, billable hours.
And they reimburse us in their transfers for that.
Okay. So there, for instance, then on street maintenance, there is a credit to for $42,000.
There's not, because that's the vast majority of the street maintenance people are general fund people, and so it's general fund paying the general fund. That doesn't make sense. The 510, the water treatment and wastewater treatment and field services are enterprise funds, and they cover their costs with their transfer of funds to us.
Bob, you may be referring to internal service funds. A lot of governmental entities that are large, like the federal government, City of Colorado Springs, have internal service funds, and they pay the general fund for services, just as you recommended now. We're such a small organization that it's really a lot of busy work to charge all that around when it's all contained within this small general fund. So we don't do that except for the enterprise funds as it is required by law
Did
for
that-
them to maintain that status.
Did that address your question?
We're
I
getting
mean,
there.
do we-
That's one thing. But when we're basically, and you should know this, you're a businessman, those are the billable hours, so to speak, okay? Everything else is overhead that you have to add to the billable hours, okay? And so, but also in calculating, for instance, the percent that the fleet 410 count should pay for the building, the $1 million that you wanted for the building, you'd come up with a percent. I don't know, I can't remember what that percent was, but if I took, how many hours are spent on each of the departments, and then say, for instance, for streets, that would be basically 48% of those hours. How
No.
did you come up with?
We're talking. There's two different things. The transfer from, say, the 510, 520 fund for here, there's an elaborate formula, and Kelly is not going to talk about it, that says this many hours, this much for overhead, this much for this, and it rolls in some of these maintenance components, and they transfer that to us. So it's a unique formula, or it's a unique numbers in the same formula every year. Fleet maintenance, the percentage breakout was done based on percent of effort given to those different departments. So it's two different things. This is really based, one of the reasons that some of these are higher from one year to another is because we're projecting to have to buy loader tires. I mean, it can be something as simple as that.
So it fluctuates every year.
It does.
Okay.
Okay. Page 18, street operations. Page 19, Parks and Rec.
Okay, I did a question on 18.
Okay.
Jeff, you said about earlier that if there's an expenditure on one account, there's a credit in another, double entry, and bookkeeping. It does show here that, or in the 410 account, that you've transferred $153,477 to the 410 account per previous discussions. But there is nothing in the expenditure here to show that debit here to offset the credit in the 410 account.
But it's rolled into, well, first of all, it goes into, it's reflected in the general fund revenues.
It's revenue from the 410.
Okay.
So, for example...
Okay, so at the very beginning, under revenues, it's
Yes.
listed there.
It's on page
That's
2.
correct.
Correct.
Okay, very good then. Thank you.
Okay. And now, page 19. Parks and Rec. And finally, page 20 is the cemetery operations and then the summation of the general fund. So I don't think it would be beneficial tonight to review the general fund summary sheets because those are going to change. So as you get those and as you review them, as we continue our meetings on the budget, we will certainly answer any questions that you have associated with that. But at this point, do you have any other questions about the general fund before we move into the grants? Okay. I'm going to ask Kelly to do the grant funds in their most simplistic form.
Thank you. If you'll join me in the budget message section on page N, as in Nancy, I summarized the grant funds so that they're much easier to review instead of all those line items. The first page summarizes the entire fund by sources and uses, meaning revenues and expenditures. We're receiving approximately $365,000 from federal and other grantors agencies. We are leveraging those funds with $186,000 out of the general fund or the 410 funds. And we expect to receive some donations and some fundraising through selling snacks at the Teen Center and various other things, donations from churches, etc., for $1,600 for a total grant fund revenues and expenditures of almost $553,000. The next page will show you which of those projects are capital. We have the uses of funds are for Colorado Historic Preservation Survey for $14,390, the Park and Ride lot for almost $251,000, and the traffic and planning and transportation study for $80,290. The sources of those funds for those capital projects are from grantors, either federal or other, of $162,970. And we're leveraging those funds from the general fund and 410 funds with matches of $182,500. On the next page are the police grants. We have the HV, high visibility, and the LEAF grants. These are DUI enforcement grants that are 100% funded for overtime for patrol for $4,000. I believe we've received notice that we'll get more than that, but we didn't have that as of print.
We're going to get more again, but they haven't told us how much.
Yeah,
It
that
wasn't money we asked
continues
for,
to
but
evolve. So we usually ask for a supplemental appropriation for these police grants because we find out later in the year. So we'll get more, but that's what we perceive for now. The Vail grant, which is funded from the 4th Judicial District Attorney's Office, is 100% funded. At $99,430 is the amount of the grant application. The award should be pretty close to that, and those are 100% funded from the grantors. And on the last page, we have other operating grants, which is really the North Teller Bag Program. The bag generation, build-a-generation is funding $69,648 with one drug-free community grant as a supplemental support grant through Teller County for $34,329. The sources of those expenses, the total of those two expenses of $103,977 come from the grantor of, as I said, $34,329, donations and fundraisers of $1,600, and the general fund, as you can see in Department 112, will supplement that operation with $68,000. And that is the grant fund. It balances revenues equal expenditures.
Questions? Bob?
Yeah, when we pay gas tax, I understand, Colorado state collects it and then disperses it to
Yes, it is.
municipalities, et cetera.
Yes, sir.
Where do we reflect that disbursement to the city?
That comes in through, let me think about that for a minute. I think that's part of the severance tax, if I'm not mistaken. I don't get a direct distribution that identifies itself as gas tax, but I believe it comes through part of that severance tax that we get. I would have to look into that, Bob.
Which is reflected in the general fund revenues on page 1.
Could you confirm that then?
Yes, I'd be happy to.
Anything else on the grants? Then let's go to the debt service funds real quick, Kelly.
Sure, I'm happy to. The debt service funds are really set up to comply with bond documents. Some people refer to them as a sinking fund. Again, revenues come in, we provide the sources for debt service payments, and then we pay the debt service payments twice a year, usually June 1st and December 1st of each year. So the revenues in the street debt service fund identify where the sources of the debt service payments come in with a little bit of interest earnings, and then we pay out the principal, interest, and any paying agent fees. For some of our bond issues, we have paying agents that are typically, Zion's Bank is our paying agent for our COPs. New York Mellon Bank of New York is our paying agent for the other issues that we have, and they charge a small fee for that service of paying the bondholders after we remit our debt service payments. That's how all of these debt service funds work. We service the street debt service, which is only the $1 million GO bond that's left. Last year we paid off the two A and Bs, which paved the streets. The drainage bonds are in 330, and the COP debt service is in 340. And while we're at it, the debt service for the DDA fund is the 305, and then we don't have to cover that next time. They all operate in the same manner, and it does identify the source of the revenue that pays the debt service.
So any questions on any of the debt service funds? As Kelly said, they're an in and out account. We have to meet our debt obligations, and so whatever we are owed, that's what we pay. Great. Well, let's do the last one tonight, and that is the 410 fund. Bill is currently in Japan with his son, getting married. Bill's not getting married, his son is. So I'm going to do my best to answer any 410 questions that you may have, and we'll begin that on page 35.
Bob?
One question before we get to 410. I did catch one, I think, math error on page 6 under planning. Prior year 2013 budget, you show 268,818. I've added this up.
I'm sorry, which, you're on page 6, which line?
The prior year 2013 budget, the total planning, it's 268,818 at the bottom there.
Yep, I can
And
see
I've
it's
added
wrong.
that like a dozen times, and it still comes to 263,109.
Yep.
I mean, it's something you can just check on to see.
I will.
I can
Thank
see
you.
the error now. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, 410 fund, page 35. That's the revenue for 410. Great, then we'll move on to the expenses for the 410 fund.
Bob?
So at the end of the expenses there, you have 3 RLF related things. Now you have on page L, RLF related to general fund, but we don't have RLF related to the 410 account.
It's on page X.
X, because it's a different RLF fund.
Right.
There's a general fund, revolving loan fund, and a 410 revolving loan fund.
Okay, these things tend to be scattered.
That's
okay,
because
good. Okay.
And I'm happy to provide magnifying glasses.
And that would be because we can't mix the money.
That's correct.
Right. No, that's fine. It's just that when we had our goals and objectives earlier this year, the LRL related projected expenditures for 2014 was $174,000, and then if you add those 3 up, it comes to $432,047. So it looks like we're paying off the RLFs a lot faster than we had anticipated.
Kelly, I'm going to ask for your help on that.
Yeah.
I think you're comparing apples and oranges.
I think so too.
But we'll get to the bottom of it.
I'll double check the number, but I feel very confident in it. If you add up the total actual annual totals for each year that appears for 2014 column, they add up to 66,300 repayment. 2040, yeah, that's. I believe it's correct, but I'm happy to double check it to make sure that it's accurate.
Okay, but what is the 329,172 use of 410 balance for RLF?
That is under the RLF loan column on page X. The first column is the capital description. You have your budget year next. The price that we have to pay for the asset is the third column. The first year we will experience a portion of that total expense, and then we borrow the amount of the RLF loan for that year, which is $329,172, which is what has to be repaid, and then it's scheduled out at the repayment schedule to the right of that box. That is the funding that we're borrowing from ourselves to purchase the cat backhoe and the street sweeper. Okay?
I did have one other question on the, I think it's the $215,000 for the drainage improvements.
Yes.
Okay. I've brought this up before, and I think during the goals and objectives, as to, whether that was necessary, or if it was, is that price pretty good? Okay. And so I've done some checking with various people. For instance, I thought, okay, who else is interested in hydrology studies for the Fountain Creek watershed? And so I checked with CDOT, because they're doing a lot of work on repairing the road, just to see if they had done a hydrology study in order to calculate the size of their culverts and dams and all that kind of stuff. And so I talked to CDOT, and they said that they're not doing any hydrology studies west of Sand Creek.
Bob,
Yes.
if I could just, I understand, I guess the question is, if we could just boil it down to the question is, what is the $215,000 in drainage improvements that we're anticipating for next year? Is
Well,
that the question?
That I think is the design, or that's the study. I know what that is. I'm questioning, do we need the study? Because CDOT is not worried about any hydrology west of Sand Creek.
But CDOT has a much different view of the world as it relates to what their mission is versus what ours is. I mean, my basic question is the $215,000. What are we thinking we're going to spend that money on? I got to understand that
Okay,
first
well,
before we go into all this other
No,
discussion.
And that would be my issue too, is because Esri has a software application, and the topology, the digital and elevation thing is basically free, and so I think the study could be done for a lot less than $215,000.
And it might be, but he's absolutely right. We had budgeted in both 2014 and 2015 similar amounts of money to redo our stormwater master plan.
Yes.
It is a study, and then it's followed by some design for some specific projects. If you recall from our discussion on June 13th, as we went into the out years beyond 2015, we started dedicating monies for actually doing some construction, with a minimal amount of design work done the year before to support that construction for the following year. So the $215,000 for year 2014 was based on Bill's experience with doing this kind of work, and based on experience talking with some of our on-call engineers and others in the industry on what it would cost to do a full-blown drainage study for our municipality. Not CDOT's roads, but our municipality. A lot of the hydrology work is done. Some of it's been done in other sources, and engineers are very good about pulling all that information in. But that's what that money would be for, is for that study so that we can move into the future, much like we did for our pavement management system. We had to pay for that study in order to implement the improvements. And could it be done for less? Maybe so. He'll bid that out. I mean, there's not an issue.
So it will be bid?
I believe so. I think that's his plan. I mean, we do have an on-call engineer, but I think he is in the process of writing up an RFP associated with this.
Okay. But with hydrology studies, you have empirical evidence, and then you have engineering algorithms and things like that.
Bob, I mean, that's not really, I mean, the question is, you know, we can go into philosophical discussions on how you do it. I don't think that matters. I mean, the real question is, are we okay with the $215,000 we've got identified for what it's identified for? Yes or no? And if the answer is no, and you want it to be less, then state your reason why you want it to be less, and let's talk about it. Otherwise, I say let's just move on. If you want to talk philosophically with Bill, he'll be happy to talk to you about hydrology and hydraulics all you want.
Okay. Well, then, my position for that, then, is no, because on 22 August, we had the storm of the century. And your department went out and saw all the damage, and Bill reported that if we had finished the Fountain Creek projects, there wouldn't have been the damage we sustained.
For one particular area, and that was for the force main and the gravity main.
Right.
Just those two things.
Yeah.
So had those two projects been done, that is true. What this will allow us to do is to have the full region studied, not only for Fountain Creek, which is the south side of town, but for that feeds Trout Creek on the north side of town. So it would be a very comprehensive study that would lead then to design for fixes around town.
Okay. Well, it's just that, you know, the last we could do basically on Fountain Creek part would be to do the same sort of rock erosion protection from where the current projects end to the city boundary.
And
Okay.
that may be true on Fountain Creek, but there are other things that feed into Fountain Creek.
Right.
There's drainage components along every street between lots. So it's significantly more than just Fountain Creek or Trout Creek. It's the entire system within the city. Are the inlets properly sized Are the culverts under driveways properly sized? It's a very comprehensive plan. Because many of the drainage systems that were installed in the early 90s were done on a shoestring budget because the funding went to build the streets, and very little drainage was included in that. So we're almost playing catch up 20 years later.
But that's why the Public Works Department went out during the storm. They took pictures of all the various areas and what were the problem areas.
So to get back to the question at hand, once again, we're talking about if I can get my eyes here to work, $215,000 for this line item. I've heard that you don't agree with it.
Yes.
Is there a number that you want to throw out that you'd like to see there? And do you think that you have a better understanding of what is needed than Bill Alsbach, who's our Public Works Director?
Well, the problem with being an engineer is you tend to put your...
We could hire you for $30,000 to do the work.
I'll do it free.
And then you can do it. Oh, you'll do it for free. Well, that's even better.
No. I'm doing a lot of things free already. But no, what I point is if you're going to compete it, hopefully then we will get that lower price. I'm not going to suggest a price, but I would suggest, request, whatever the word is, that this be competed.
And I would actually disagree with that, because I do not believe that you hire engineers based on bidding. I think you hire engineers and professionals based on quality-based selection, which has nothing to do with pricing.
And we
you know what, we can get into that philosophical discussion if you want. I rely on staff. I think staff does a great job. And, I'm okay with the $215,000. I say we let staff do it the way that they want to do it, and it'll be fine. Ken?
I'm okay with the 215. I suggest we move on, if others agree.
Yep, I agree.
And Bob, I would recommend that you go have a discussion with Bill Alsbach, and you can spend an hour with him and talk about all these different things, and maybe that will help you with your understanding or raise other issues.
Okay. Then, Council, that completes our discussion of the budget this evening. Recognize that we will be coming back on November 7th to talk all the other funds. Then at the second meeting in November, we'll present the budget, hopefully in its final form, with an initial posting of the ordinance, and then the final reading would be at the first meeting in December. So I appreciate your patience. We will give you supplemental pages. They're numbered, and they're updated with the date-time group on how current they are. So you can throw the other ones away or mark through them however you want to do that. So, thank you.
Thank you. All right. It's always a good discussion when we talk about budgets. One of the most important things we do every year.
And if I could, I'm sorry. Our department heads have done a phenomenal job this year, as they do every year, to fine-tune the budget to really take advantage of every opportunity for cost savings and good service.
So moving on to item number 11, public comment on items not on the agenda. Is there anyone that would like that has something this evening for the council? No? All right. Moving along to reports. So the Mayor Pro Tem's report, I guess. I have a few items. First off, on the student art, I walked in tonight and saw that, and I was like, it looked like a picture, at first, and just wonderful. So I encourage everyone to go up and take a look at that, and it's kind of fat stenciled, I think. I'm not much of an art critic. But Eric Leonis, she's a senior at the high school. That is her artwork, and outstanding. So 3 items, events that are upcoming. Friday, October 18th is the third Friday Art Walk, downtown Colorado Springs, downtown Woodland Park, 5 to 8 p.m. The second item is Friday, October 25th and Saturday, October 26th, the Halloween Spook Fest at the Ute Pass Cultural Center from 6 to 8 p.m. And the last item that I have this evening is Thursday, November 7th, the Chamber Lunch and Learn series, evaluating older drivers. That's interesting. 11:30 to 1. So, that's all I have. Council reports, Gary. Bob? Carol?
I will attend the Colorado Municipal League Policy Committee meeting tomorrow in Denver for the council. Earlier in the week, I sent out the issues that will be considered tomorrow. I didn't get any feedback on this, but I will support the CML's stand on all of those issues.
Okay. Ken? All right. Thank you. Aaron, anything
I have nothing
more? All right. And David?
Sally's going to give us a quick update on the building department process.
Thank you. As you're all aware, we decided to partner with the Pikes Peak Regional Building Department out of Colorado Springs, and that decision was made just less than a couple of weeks ago, and a lot has happened since that time. I do have a advisory committee, which is an ad hoc committee of builders and architects, and Debbie Miller and the HBA president. They've been meeting weekly with me to help provide some guidance as we work through the transition with Teller County. I've been meeting with Teller County weekly as well, their staff, so to expedite and facilitate the transition. And on November 5th, that's a Tuesday evening, Election Day, at the Cultural Center, we will be introducing Henry Yankowski. He is the head building official for RBD. And then the building inspector, Bert Warhol, who is going to be our building inspector. And he will be here 20 hours a week, scheduled time, so that he is able to help us answer questions, review plans, take plans to the Springs, and just facilitate all of this process. I've also been working on code adoption, because we will be adopting the 2009 International Code and RBD's code with exceptions, so that we are unique in some ways, and trying to keep some of those code issues comparable to what our builders are used to with the Teller County codes. So a lot happening in a very short period of time.
Okay. Ken?
Just a quick question. Where's the office up here going to be located?
Well, we will be utilizing the planning
Here?
office and squeezing everybody in and
Okay.
be able to take all of our intake, so that you'll be processing both the ZDPs and the building permits here. We expect to get 2 computers set up, in fact, this week. They've already got their IT staff on board and got a department set up for Woodland Park, so that the fees will all be charged. And I'll be bringing forward the fee resolution and the code adoption to all of you. And there will be a memorandum of understanding with the building department that you'll get to see as well.
Thank you.
And we would approve the MOU?
Yes.
Okay. And a couple, Bob brought it up, and I won't go through all of the concerns I have relative to what we've discussed already. With the major project that's underway, that's been reviewed, and permits are ready to be pulled and issued by Teller County. It's a 18-month process. In fact, other clients are kind of in that catch-22 as well. I just want to make sure that things are done smoothly, and I know you do as well, and the city does. But I have some concerns over the way regional building might interpret things versus the way that Teller County's interpreted things. And I don't want to get into a situation where we have folks that they're ready to move forward, and regional building decides to do something different. The one question I have is, ultimately, city council, I would assume, retains the ability to override just as we had the ability to override Teller County, and we had the one instance where somebody came forward and went through the appeal process, and it came to city council. I would assume that we would have the same authority, that if regional building for whatever reason was, and somebody wanted to appeal it, that the ultimate appeal would be to city council.
We will establish an appeal board of local builders and architects and engineers. The variance requests would go to that appeal board first, If the appeal board then denies the variance, then the applicant has the opportunity to come to council to hear their appeal.
So ultimately, council still retains that,
Yep.
and regional building is okay with that, and,
Yes.
okay. Bob?
I have a couple questions too. One is that appeals process pretty quick? Because if you're about to pour concrete and you have an issue, you want it resolved fast, okay? The other question is, well, go ahead and answer that one first.
They'll meet monthly, and so we'll have a deadline and posting and noticing requirements. Right now, there's a 30-day submittal, pre-submittal application prior to the meeting.
And would there be the ability in a situation where they could, you could call a special meeting or whatever? Because I could absolutely see where things are going to come up that their inspectors are going to say, well, we don't read the code that way, even though you got a permit, and you're ready to go, and those are my fears.
Let us work on those. I mean, we understand this transition period between the county and the city, and between regional building and Teller County. There are going to be nuances. It's our fear too, and we're getting thrown a couple of curveballs from the county as well, and we're working through those. So I don't know that we're going to be able to address your concerns tonight, but know that we understand them. It would be interesting to know how many times someone has been delayed placing concrete because of an issue. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
Well,
but it's
that was
never
an example.
No, I understand that, but I don't want us to make a mountain out of a molehill. But by the same token, we need to make sure the molehills are covered.
And my second question is the International Building Code. It does allow for regional variations.
Yes.
For instance, the frost depth, how deep your foundation's got, the footer's got to be. And when we were building habitat houses up in Cripple Creek, it was 30 inches, whereas the Springs was 36 inches. Okay, so that didn't make sense at all because it's colder up here. But anyway, the issue was, now Teller County was working on changing, doing those regional adaptations. Are we going to take this?
That's what Sally said. She said that regional building was going to look at some of the exceptions that exist up here
And
that
have
don't
our
exist in
own
the
there.
Springs. That's right.
We would have
Because
ours.
we will have our own code.
Right. Okay, good.
Anything else on that?
Then lastly, each year the Cruise Above the Clouds presents a plaque of appreciation to the city. They frame their poster because the city does provide them with funding through the Community Investment Fund, and historically they return, what would it be, 1,500% back to the community, that order of magnitude. So each year I present it, and then I take it back and we hang it in an appropriate place within the city. Thank you for your support of them.
Anything else?
No, sir.
All right.
If we gave them more money, would they give us 1,500% of that more money?
They don't actually return it to us.
Okay.
All right, item 13, there's no comments on written correspondence. It is 9:56, and we will close the meeting.